Ladies and gents, boys and girls, what is going on? Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host, the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. I see Evan Lusk, Braddock, Noah Johns, Austin Gregory, GA, Ethan, Brendan, John Edward. What is up? Appreciate y'all tuning in. Also, those, of course, in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure that your questions are answered there. Again, we got a packed show for you guys, a lot to get into here on this Tuesday. Of course, in our third hour, we will have our Q&A Power Hour. It will be a more traditional Q&A Power Hour today. I don't think we're going to have JC Shurburtt on for an hour and a half or so. Again, Chris Marler, thank him so much yesterday. That was a fantastic conversation. Really glad also we were able to touch on all 14 teams in the SEC. But the third hour we will dedicate today to taking your questions, your comments, your calls at 843-790-3377. In our second hour, as I just mentioned, JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur. He will join us, which will be a lot of fun because I don't know if you guys saw this. JC and Morgan this morning, they had head coach Shane Beamer on their airwaves, chatting with him one-on-one. So we'll hear from JC what Coach Shane Beamer had to say. Also, of course, talk SEC Media Day, some other things as fall camp is just around the corner, guys. Fall camp set to get going next week, Shane Beamer confirmed on social media. Really exciting stuff. Again, we'll talk with JC in that second hour. Like I mentioned, this first hour, a lot to get into. Our opponent preview series rolls on. We talk Mizzou today, and also very excited for the position unit preview series to get going as we talk Gamecocks quarterbacks over the next 2 days. Then, of course, beginning on Thursday, we'll talk running backs, et cetera, and we'll go from there for the next couple of weeks, talking each and every single position unit on this Gamecocks football team. Things such as top storylines, most to prove, best overall, season will be successful if, and I'll give my overall grade for every single position unit. So again, guys, really excited to be chatting with you all here on this Tuesday. Thank y'all again so much for the continued love and support. Appreciate each and every single one of you. My guy Brendan says the PLD hackers don't want to watch. My internet's not cooperating. Brendan, I hope that your internet fixes itself because, again, we got a packed show, busy show, a lot to get into. With that being said, guys, like I mentioned, we've been breaking down the 2023 schedule, and I have been staying very, very busy. If we're not on TDC, we're on an interview with somebody. We actually had an interview this morning with a Texas A&M contributor over at Locked On Aggies podcast. That will air tomorrow. We're talking with my guy Billy Derrick tonight from Vanderbilt. That'll air later in the week. We got other conversations lined up, jam-packed content bleeding out the eyeballs. DGD, what's going on? Like I mentioned, guys, Q&A Power Hour, hour number 3, JC Shurburtt in hour number 2, and we'll talk position unit preview series later in the show. But for now, let's go ahead and get into it. Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast, he joined me to talk all things Missouri Tigers going in the 2023 football season and that game this season in Como. A really, really interesting and a fun conversation, guys. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast. As our 2023 opponent preview series continues, we go to Como, Columbia, Missouri, to talk the Missouri Tigers, and who better than Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast as he joins the show. Colin, appreciate you taking the time, man. What's going on?
Not much, man. I'm glad to be here.
And like I said, off air, Colin, this is a really cool thing because we've done work with you guys way long time ago, but the Armchair All-Americans connection, and of course, those that remember that are really day one fans, followers, listeners, whatever of TSUS, and you guys are obviously continuing doing great work at the Mazodcast, and I think giving some of the most fun perspective on Missouri Tigers sports as well. Truly, I think that's why I've always been gravitated to you guys' content because it's not too serious. It's very fun, laid back. You're speaking with the fan, not even to the fan necessarily. So you guys do a great job. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We had a heated debate about French fries and chicken sandwiches on our last show. So, yeah, we don't take ourselves too seriously. There's some other stuff in there besides football.
the things that people really care about, my friend. I love that. Well,
That's right.
Let's talk a little Missouri football, Colin, because I think Mizzou one of the most intriguing teams in the SEC this year. Before we look at this year's team, let's look back though at 2022, 6-7, 3-5 in SEC play a season ago. Lost the Gasparilla Bowl to Wake Forest, and that was coming in year 3 of Eli Drinkwitz. Just talk about that season, because you look at the slate. I mean, you beat South Carolina, but then back-to-back losses to Kentucky and Tennessee. Close out your regular season winning 2 in a row. You get that big win over Arkansas, which I know you guys had a lot of fun with my guy John Neighbors over the last week or so talking about, Arkansas should never lose to Mizzou. And it's so funny. It feels like every team that loses to Mizzou says that, but they lose to them. So it's like, well, what can you really say? Again, losing in that bowl game to Wake Forest. Just talk about, though, the 2022 season for Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers.
I mean, disappointing, obviously. A couple of losses, Auburn, specifically, and Kentucky were both bad losses. Games Mizzou should have definitely won. Eli Drinkwitz talked about it at the media days. There was that punt rule. I don't know if you guys remember that play. Not going to get into it. But anyway, so they were close to winning some games that they should have. And really, Eli hasn't been able to close. And I think most people are worried about the quarterback situation. They feel like most of Mizzou's shortcomings were, or at least on offense, were the result of Brady Cook. And he's a perfectly nice guy. He is a longtime Mizzou fan. He was recruited to Mizzou. He's the kid that's got pictures of him at 8 years old with a Mizzou cap on at the football game. And so he's easy to like, but he's not very good. And my friends in the more conventional media the way they code that is by saying he's limited. That's the nice way of saying he's not good enough to play Division I football. And that's where we're at. And he had a torn labrum on top of that. And so really the Eli Drinkwitz era has been marked by sort of not knowing who to play at quarterback and very bad quarterback play. For an offensive coach, or at least a guy who came and sold us that, it's not a great look. My brother is fully off the bandwagon for Eli Drinkwitz. He did a John Wick style shoulder roll off of that last season after watching Brady Cook start with a 4-star riding the pine. And I'm still on board because he brings in a lot of recruits. He's now, don't get me wrong, we start Cook at the beginning of this season. I will join him barrel rolling off of the wagon, but he's just like right now he brought in a kid from Oklahoma, Theo Weist. He's 10 scores last year, over 1,000 yards receiving. He's got Burden coming back this year, who is a 4-star recruit. I guess you want to know about last season, but the reason I'm high on Drinkwitz to this point has just been the recruiting, but his season has been disappointing last year and then the years previous. And I think my brother pointed on the podcast that he will have to win at least 4 SEC games this year and have 8 or 9 wins just to get to the total Barry Odom had to get fired. And so his seat is very hot, and last season had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, you look at the last 4 years, Colin, to your point, for Missouri football: 6-6, 5-5, 6-6, and 6-6 in the regular season. So I've made the joke before, and it's no offense, obviously, but that Eli Drinkwitz to me feels like the Jeff Fisher of college football, where he just goes 500 every single year. 4th year for Eli, obviously, and it's the Gamecock side of things we'll get into late in the show, because that's the one team. If he could just play South Carolina 12 times, I mean, Eli Drinkwitz is the best coach in college history. But coming into his 4th season, like you mentioned, they just gave him an extension, which I think we all kind of raise an eyebrow at, but there's a lot of pressure coming in this year. I mean, when you return what they return, which we'll get into in a second, there's a lot of pressure to go one way or the other and just break the mold again of going 500 and kind of wallowing in mediocrity. So I'll ask you this, and when you look at the team they have, by the way, as well, there's reason to believe they could do that. What's the overall mood and the feelings around Eli Drinkwitz from the Missouri fan base going into his 4th season in Como?
Well, I mean, like all fan bases, you have your your diehards that are just going to support whoever the coach is, regardless. But his seat is not just hot with the admin and the university; it's hot with the fans. And like I said, we've had constant quarterback issues. It's funny. Mizzou was playing a big game. I think maybe it was against Kansas in basketball, and Eli Drinkwitz thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun? I'll show up with a bunch of pizzas for the students all waiting to get in. And literally, when he showed up with pizzas, of course, the students loved it. And they also surrounded him and started chanting, "Start Sam Horn." And so, I mean, like he's not fired yet, but I mean, everybody is, on him all the time about some of these personnel decisions. And um, again, to listen to him talk at like the media days, Sam Horn is his quarterback. Or, I'm sorry, not Sam Horn. Brady Cook is his quarterback, and somebody has to take that from him. And I think that decision in specific is the reason why fans are really starting to get frustrated with him. Going constantly 500, and then you can bring these big recruits in like Sam Horn, who is a 4-star, and he doesn't play you've got a guy who was visibly limited starting. And maybe Sam Horn isn't ready. Nobody's ready. Nobody knows that until he plays. But it's hard to really. It says two things about Eli Drinkwitz, and I know this constitutes a large part of the fan base. Is if Sam Horn isn't starting, if Brady Cook is, it says one of two things: either Eli Drinkwitz can't figure out which quarterback is better, or two, the guy he recruited to play quarterback isn't good enough. But both of those things aren't good for Eli Drinkwitz. So he's got a lot to prove. He's gotten the moniker Captain 500, and it can all turn around though. Mizzou is one of those fan bases, and I think South Carolina may be a little like this. It doesn't take much success for the fans to be like, all right, we're happy with this. We're not Alabama. We know we're not Alabama. If we're not competing for championships every year, nobody's going to be on the hot seat. You win 8 or 9 games a season. You kick a hole in Florida or Kentucky or Tennessee once in a while, especially Tennessee. If you kick a hole in them once in a while, everybody's going to forgive a lot of shit. But pardon my French. I don't know if you guys curse on your show.
Wait, go ahead.
Okay. They'll overlook a lot of stuff. But right now he is not doing that. And he's not winning close games. It's just, like I said, his seat's pretty hot. The fans are not high on him. It's pretty 50-50 right now. I think a lot is going to fall on who is the starting quarterback on opening day, because that's I think for me and a lot of fans, that's what we're ready to jump off the cliff if that's what happens.
So, Colin, let's go to the offensive side of the football as we turn the attention to the 2023 Missouri Tigers. And my first note I have written here is there a battle at quarterback, because it's funny. Most people I talk to at SEC Media Days, they mention that, oh, Brady Cook's QB1, no doubt. Brady Cook's QB1. What I heard Eli Drinkwitz say was Brady Cook is going to have a really tough time fending off. You mentioned Sam Horn, a 4-star signee, and Jake Garcia, who's also a blue chipper out of the transfer portal coming from Miami. So I think there's definitely a battle at the quarterback position. I mean, anytime the quarterback position is your number one question mark on your offense, there's going to be an open competition there. But you've got those 3 guys battling it out. Luther Burden III, like you mentioned, he returns at wide receiver, accompanied by Theo Weish Jr., who you picked up out of the transfer portal from Oklahoma, and Dennis Jackson coming over from Ole Miss. So some weapons on the outside for sure. Cody Schrader back at running back, 744 yards, 9 touchdowns a season ago. And 3 of 5 are back on the offensive line, but there's a lot of experience in that 2 deep as well. So when you talk about the Missouri offense, does it simply just boil down to the quarterback play? Because it sounds like at the other positions, Mizzou has some weapons to work with.
Yeah, and they've got another wide receiver, Manning, coming in, who's a 4-star. I mean, they have got plenty of weapons. Forgive me, the name escapes me. I think last name is Jones. We got a 4-star running back who's sort of riding the pine behind Schrader. Not that he needs to start right away necessarily, but there's talent everywhere on the field, and delivering the ball is, like I said, the biggest question, and who can do that. And I agree that I don't think it's a lock that Cook takes the job. I think nothing about what Drinkwitz has said has been controversial. I mean, if you have a guy who starts 14 games for you the previous season and did nothing really to lose the job, I mean, he didn't do a good job as a quarterback, but I mean, he didn't do anything to lose the job necessarily either. And so why wouldn't you say, well, this is this guy's job to lose? He was my starter. He continues to be my starter, and somebody's going to have to take it from him. And that's basically all Drinkwitz has said. So I'm listen, hopeful that one of these guys can really take the horns to this offense, because I think there's a lot of talent on it. I've seen what Brady Cook has, and I'm not impressed. And I hate to say that. I mean, I've never hoped to be wrong more. If he starts Brady Cook and he becomes a all SEC quarterback, no one will be happier than me. I just don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, we talked about that limited ceiling, but there's, especially at the wide receiver position, I mean, they've got talent for days, but do they have a guy that can deliver that ball?
Defense was the calling card for Mizzou a season ago, and it looks to be the same way this season. A huge jump in year one of defensive coordinator Blake Baker. Missouri ranked 15th nationally, second in the SEC in tackles for loss per game, and over 80%, Colin, of the production return. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic and believe that the defense will be a strength once again for the Missouri Tigers. Darius Robinson, Christian Williams return up front. 2022 breakout star Tyron Hopper returns in the middle. You've got Ennis Rakestraw Jr., Chris Abrams-Drain, Jalen Carleys, and Joseph Charlton, who are all back in the secondaries. Again, 8 starters return. Simply put, Colin, the defense should be the strength of this football team yet again.
Absolutely. Tyron Hopper is a draft pick. He sort of leads the whole thing. The Carleys guy in the secondary is a playmaker. Abrams-Drain, they're good in the secondary. Tyron Hopper is a terrific linebacker. I think there's still questions up front, even with the returning guys. We lost, Wingo to LSU, and he was a huge, huge talent. And to lose him is going to hurt. I mean, I don't know who's going to fill that hole. I know they're looking at some guys, but the up front still worries me a little bit. But if they get the up front solid, the defense should be stifling. I mean, honestly, it's not hyperbole. They will be a handful for any team in the SEC next year if they can shore up that defensive line.
Now you look at the special teams. Riley Williams, the Aussie, arrives via the portal at punter. You got big-legged Harrison Mevis back, and then Luther Burden III is lethal in the return game. Anything stand out in regards to special teams? I'm a South Carolina guy. We got to talk a little special teams. Anything stand out in that facet of the game for Mizzou?
Well, with a thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis, everybody knows the thicker kicker. He's got some ghetto booty on him, and that's everybody loves it. But and he has really made some big kicks and some long kicks, and everybody fell in love with this guy. Now, at the end of last season, things got pretty shaky, and so I think everybody's looking for a resurgence from Harrison Mevis, because when he's good, and he's on his game, he's as good as anybody in the SEC. He has got a big leg.
But to your point, he is 10 of 13 all time on field goals, 50 yards or longer. I mean, this dude is lethal.
Yeah, he can bomb it, and like I said, he missed some easy kicks at the end of last season. I think it was just a little in his head, but I think they're going to be fine there. Obviously, Burden gives them a real weapon in the return game. I wonder, depending on how much action he gets on the offensive side, if he won't share those duties a little bit. In college football, I feel like they should always stick the guy with the most talent back there regardless. But I know at some point, when their reps get really high, that sometimes they'll pull them out of there. But I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But really, they should be solid on special teams. I mean, of course, we haven't seen the punter yet, but at least in the kicking game, return game, it's a strength, not a weakness in Mizzou's roster.
So, Colin, as we look at the overall outlook, 14 starters are back from Mizzou, 6 on the offensive side, 8 on the defensive side. And I feel like year 4 in Como for him, it's all about breaking the mold of going 500 and having that breakout season. And you look at the 2023 schedule, it starts out very favorably for Mizzou to really, in the first month, build some momentum. You got South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Kansas State's a big one. That's going to be an interesting home matchup. Memphis as well. That's in St. Louis. Then at Vandy. So you've really got an opportunity to get things rolling before you host the LSU Tigers to kick off the month of October. That's been a really weird place for LSU to play as well. I think you guys beat them the last time they came to Como. Then you go to Kentucky. Of course, you got the game with South Carolina we'll talk about in a second. Get your bye week. Then you go to Georgia, Tennessee at home, Florida at home, at Arkansas. Expectations for year 4 of the Drinkwitz era, and how do you feel the 2023 schedule shakes out to give Mizzou fans that breakout season they're all looking for?
Well, it's certainly nice to have like Tennessee and Florida at home. Those are tough matchups always in the East. So that's nice. And like I said, we've got an opportunity to really come out of the gates hottest. That Kansas State game, we got beat pretty handily by Kansas State last season. It was one of those games that it's the game that Brady Cook got hurt in, and it is also the game that I think sent our season on a downward trajectory right out of the gate. We were old Big 12 rivals with Kansas State. And there was a lot of fanfare around that game, and then to kind of show up or not show up at all for that game was derailed that season. So that'll be a big one for us this season of that early group of games that you talked about. That's the one that's really the only one that really Missouri shouldn't be able to take care of, or easily anyway. I always say that you have to show up and win those games, but they should be the favorite in all those games except for Kansas State. So they've got an opportunity to really start out fast, and they need to. They need to build some momentum, because when you get in the teeth of that SEC schedule, you need to feel some confidence that you know what you're doing. And especially, it gives you time to settle your roster too before you really get into the teeth of your schedule. I think it works out well for Mizzou. I think a lot of those programs are have an upward trajectory in the SEC right now in the East, and so none of that stuff is a given, I guess is what I'm saying. And in the past, Kentucky has had our number too. We need to get that monkey off our back. I know you'd mentioned the Arkansas stuff earlier this week. We own Arkansas, and there was a talking head who basically said that, yeah, despite that we beat them, that they're better. Well, that's been Kentucky for us. We Missouri fans love to act like they're better than Kentucky, but Kentucky has owned us, and so that's another big one that Eli Drinkwitz needs to win that football game. And if he especially said he's going to get to that 4 SEC wins and 9 wins and get to Barry Odom level of success, so maybe he can keep his job.
So, Colin, overall outlook before we get to the game against South Carolina, the media picked Missouri to finish 6th in the SEC East. Immediate reaction to that, I was somewhat surprised to see them that low because there's so much positive chatter around the Missouri program going into this year. Your thoughts?
That's not surprising at all. That's not surprising at all. I don't think.
Behind Florida surprised me.
Oh, listen. We could have just take whoever Alabama has recruited this year, put them all on our roster, and give us Alabama's roster, and the SEC media would pick us number 6. And I mean, we are not fazed by that. That is just the way we are. I mean, these papers down south do not think much of Mizzou.
Colin, that's a great point you make. Why do you think that Missouri is viewed almost as like the redheaded stepchild of the SEC?
Why we don't belong. We don't belong. We're not SEC.
Texas A&M is not viewed in that same light, but Missouri is.
I don't know. I mean, we have the fewest number of trailer homes in our state, the highest literacy rate in the SEC. Infant mortality is not near as bad in this state as the others. I just don't think we fit. We're not a good cultural fit. I think sometimes they think, listen, guys, there's plenty of pickup trucks with flags on them here. We're SEC. We got this. We're all part of this together. Trust me. You come up here, you will not see a great big difference from Arkansas. Not a whole lot. Maybe a little better dental hygiene, but not, culturally, we're SEC guys. I'm telling you, just take a trip to Missouri. You will find out. You will be like, hey, these guys belong. Yeah, these guys have used a bong before. They have shotgunned beers. That's this. So it's all good.
Colin, I love that, man. And like I said, hey, one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I love the brutal honesty. And so when we're talking South Carolina, Mizzou, feel free to, again, you're not going to hurt my feelings. And I'll let you, give it to the Arkansas guys on their show. But the reason I say that, 4 straight wins over South Carolina for Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz himself has 4 straight, dating back to when he was the head coach at Appalachian State, and he beat the Gamecocks and Willie B. How does Missouri view the South Carolina program? Because I think what's so interesting about this dynamic and this game specifically, the Battle of the Mayor's Cup, right, as they've nicknamed it, and there have been some great games. I think what's really cool is to see this game sort of turn into it's not a rivalry like South Carolina Clemson or Auburn Alabama, but it's turned into a really fun SEC East rivalry because it feels like the games are always wacky, always weird, and very entertaining. But how does Missouri view South Carolina? Because I know how South Carolina fans view Missouri. They look at Mizzou as that should be a win every year. We should never lose to Mizzou. I mean, I even was asked about this at SEC Media Days, and I gave the answer of, hey, South Carolina fans feel that way, but I also made the point that you've lost 4 in a row on the football field. That's what really counts at the end of the day. That's what counts at the end of the day. So let me ask you this from the Mizzou perspective, because all I hear is the South Carolina perspective. How do Missouri fans feel about the Gamecocks football program?
Well, I think, if you ask a fan, they'll say, oh, we're better than South Carolina. We ought to beat them every year, the same as the South Carolina feels about us. If you want to be honest with it, I think, the real fan who's paying attention thinks South Carolina is Mizzou. Mizzou is South Carolina. We are two programs sort of living on that same level. Mizzou's had a little more success of late, maybe a little more stability in our program, but listen, we're fighting for the same recruits. We're fighting for the same station in this conference. A SEC East championship for us is a big season. That's what we're going for. Let's be realistic, neither of these programs is competitive for an SEC championship. We're going to eventually run into the Georgias. We're going to run into the Alabamas, and maybe we'll have one of those magical seasons and we'll give those guys a run for their money, but we're not those programs. And we acknowledge that. And I at least from my perspective, most, sort of educated Mizzou fans look at South Carolina as a brother from another mother. Like we are basically on the same footing, both hoping for magical seasons. And we're both standing one another's way. I mean, when you talk about the difference between a great season, a good season, a bad season, it's usually just a win or two. And South Carolina is a team you're going to face every year. And if you're going to have one of those magical seasons, you got to beat South Carolina. And South Carolina says, hey, same thing. We can't be what we want to be until we get this pissant Mizzou out of our way. And so we're just looking for that. We're both in the way of having that magical season. And I think and like you said, the games have been great, and that builds rivalry. And I know South Carolina fans are probably throwing up in their mouth as I say the word rivalry with Mizzou, because they're not rival, but they are. And again, let's be honest, we are. We're on the same footing. We're both going for the same prizes. We're rivals. And like I said, I look forward to the South Carolina game because of that. I much more look forward to the South Carolina game than I do the Kentucky game. Because I look for that to be a good game. I don't really care about Kentucky. Not that I shouldn't, but I definitely put more weight on that South Carolina game. I think most Mizzou fans feel that way because there is a bit of heat between these two teams.
And Colin, again, to your point, you look at this game kind of right in the middle of the schedule, or kind of mid-October, if you will, a huge swing game, I think, for both sides. I mean, for South Carolina especially, but Mizzou also, because you look at the stretch that follows. You have your bye week after. Then you got to go to Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, then at Arkansas. So it's a tough slate to finish. Like you mentioned, that this is a swing game for both sides that is so pivotal. I can't tell you, Colin, the amount of Gamecock fans that I've had tell me that, Chris, our season won't be a success unless we beat Mizzou. Like, that's how big of a deal
it doesn't sound like a rivalry, does it?
Right. I mean, I would say it is. I mean, listen, you have a trophy, you look at the games on the field, it has developed into that SEC East rivalry, but overall outlook of the ball game, I mean, I think there should be, God, dude, if I was a Mizzou guy, I would say there'd be a ton of confidence. My head coach has never lost to you. Like, my team hasn't lost to you in forever. This is a defense that shut down the same exact weapons you're bringing back from last year. Granted, there's a new OC. The overall outlook of the game, you get this game at Como. Just thoughts on the matchup with the Gamecocks specifically this season.
So I think the way I would say that is that I look at the South Carolina Gamecocks as middling. Mm-hmm. And I think Mizzou has a above middling defense this year. And so you get two middling programs, you lock horns, it's going to come down to who's got that something special. And this year I think Mizzou, that's something special is our defense. And that's why I'll pick Mizzou. And it's not because I think that we have worlds more talent or that it's a much better program in South Carolina. I'm like, listen, just objectively this year, Mizzou is going to have a very, very dangerous defense. And South Carolina's offense is just not that strong a unit, at least not yet. And I know Beamer's working on it, but I don't think it's shit. It's not striking fear in the hearts of any program. And when a team like Mizzou has the defense, if it has the defense we expect it to have, South Carolina honestly should be a bump in the road. Now, again, I'm not saying we're going to win. I'm not saying I guarantee it, but it'll just, as I look at it on paper, I'm like, they're going to have a hard time handling Mizzou's defense.
Again, Colin, swing game, I think is the best way to put it. One of those coin flip games in the SEC that really makes SEC football so much fun and what it is. Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast, check him out. Hey, let everybody know, Colin, where they can check out you guys' work.
Yeah, we're on, obviously, on Twitter at Mazodcast. You can email us at mazodcast.com, at Gmail. We're on Threads now. We're on Instagram. We're basically anywhere you can find your angry uncle making political tweets or posts. That's where we're at. You can find us there too. So, go ahead and look for us there at Mazodcast.
Colin, I appreciate you taking the time, man. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot.
Okay, that was Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast. I'm sure he won a lot of you over. Let me just say this. I know he pissed a lot of y'all off, but I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. Really good stuff from Colin Anthony. And just to hear, guys, a differing perspective. It's like I've told you many times. And, we talk about preseason predictions and expectations. There are fans, believe it or not, just like you, of other teams that have the same exact expectations and hopes and, not so positive thoughts on South Carolina. So very, very interesting comments from Colin Anthony there. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, though, we're going to get into our position unit preview series as we begin to break down the Gamecocks quarterbacks heading in the 2023 football season. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Marshall Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. Going to appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Like I said, hope you enjoyed that conversation with Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast. And just in case you guys don't realize, yes, this is live. So make sure you know this is live. We are live right now. I pre-record those opponent previews just because, guys, it's way too hard to coordinate everyone's schedule and get them lined up with coming on at exactly 12:05 or exactly 12:15 or exactly 12:30 or whatever the time is. So it's much easier to record sometime outside of the live show and then broadcast that all to you all. But as you all know, the majority of this show is live really after the opponent preview series. I don't know that there'll be much of it that will be any sort of pre-recorded content. Either way, guys, going to appreciate you all tuning in. I see the comments rolling in. Make sure you continue to do so as we will have our Q&A Power Hour in hour number 3. And we'll take all of your questions, your comments, and your calls as well. With that being said, we begin our 2023 opponent preview series as over the next 2 days, we'll break down the Gamecocks quarterbacks heading into the 2023 football season. You look at the quarterbacks on this year's roster: Luke Doty, Spencer Rattler, Tanner Bailey, Lenoris Sellers, and Colton Gauthier. Of course, Spencer Rattler returns as QB1. Luke Doty was the only other true quarterback on the roster to throw a pass. Of course, as you all know, Kai Kroger went 6 of 6 for 3 touchdowns, or at least 4 of 4 last year. He's 6 of 6 in his career with 3 touchdowns. Also, DeKevrion Joyner last year went 3 for 3 for 101 yards and 1 touchdown as well. But that was all the Gamecocks that threw a pass in last season. But of course, again, Spencer Rattler returning as QB1, 18 touchdowns to 12 interceptions a season ago. And guys, that is where we begin, as we're talking top storylines for the Gamecocks quarterbacks entering the 2023 football season. And when you talk about the quarterback position, guys, this season, for the most part, it's all about Spencer Rattler. QB1, this is his money year, as Rattler's being projected as probably a mid-second round, or mid-second day, I should say, pick in the 2024 NFL draft. When you look at his first season in Columbia and going into this year, the first thing you have to talk about when it comes to Spencer Rattler, and one of the big storylines for him, is finding consistency. The question of which version of Spencer Rattler does South Carolina get more of? The one in the first 10 games that threw 8 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, or the last 3 games when he threw 10 touchdowns to 3 interceptions? People forget just how abysmal Spencer Rattler was through 9 or 10 games a season ago. My good friend Brad Crawford of 24/7 Sports went as far as to say he was a cataclysmic bust through those first 9 games. Went the entire month, I believe, of October without throwing a touchdown pass, and threw more touchdown passes in the win over Tennessee than he did in that entire month of October. Early in the season, you could tell it was a guy that was struggling to grasp the offensive system, the offensive scheme, and certainly lay the blame at Marcus Satterfield and what they were trying to do. It was far too complex. Way too many personnel groupings. Way too many 15-word play calls. Way too much check with me. Spencer Rattler was not able to play free and be himself in that offensive scheme and system. Let's also point out this, though. Spencer Rattler's decision-making was poor. It was poor. He was late with the football. He made some very questionable decisions. He did not take care of the football, which we'll talk about more in just a second. But finding consistency for Spencer Rattler, because here's the thing, guys. The ceiling, Spencer Rattler's ceiling, is the best quarterback in college football. I truly believe that. Is he going to be what he was in the Tennessee game every week this week or every week this season? No, he's not. But when Spencer Rattler is playing his best, he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Raising the floor is the number one priority for Spencer Rattler, and just how much he's able to raise that floor and can he provide a consistent product going to be key to his success in this season. I also mentioned another big storyline for Rattler, protecting the football. 12 interceptions a season ago. South Carolina as a football team had 22 fumbles. 13 of those were lost fumbles, and of course, Spencer Rattler had a few of his own. You heard Shane Beamer at SEC Media Days preach on turnovers. He went as far as to emphasize and say, we have led the SEC in interceptions thrown and fumbles lost. He knows it's a big deal. He knows it's an issue. Spencer Rattler, who spoke on it at SEC Media Days, he knows it's an issue. He knows it's something that must be fixed. If Spencer Rattler can cut the turnovers in half, and I don't want to spoil my season will be successful if, because there's multiple layers to it, but for QB1 for the Gamecocks, cutting down on the turnovers, it's not a nice to have, a need to do. It's a must. I mean, it's an absolute must for he and this South Carolina offense to reach their full potential. As I mentioned earlier, the big storyline, the decision-making. And this goes hand in hand with the turnovers and, his consistency. But does the decision-making improve, guys? Because even in the Clemson game last season, which we look at as, one of Spencer Rattler's best games, of course, the Gamecocks snapped the streak against the arch rival. They win that game 31-30. And he made some brilliant throws in that ball game, some brilliant plays. But I feel like that game was a fantastic microcosm of what Spencer Rattler is. A microcosm of the things he does really, really well and why he's one of the best in college football. And a microcosm of why at times he's impossible to watch. And he loses ball games for you. A pick six to start the game. A costly interception in the end zone when your receiver is covered up. There's no doubt he is not open. And Spencer Rattler forces the issue anyways. The decision-making has to improve. The decision-making overall has to improve for Spencer Rattler. And again, this goes hand in hand with the interceptions, the turnovers. A lot of those interceptions came because of poor decision-making. Guys, I know it's just a spring game, but I even look at that and I say to myself, there was a play in that spring game, you might recall. And to be fair, the whistle was blown about 3/4 of the way through the play. But Spencer Rattler rolls out to his left and willingly just throws the ball into double or triple coverage. And it would have been a pick six in a real game. And while it's a spring game, the play didn't count. No big deal. But I looked at that and said, that's Spencer Rattler. Like, that's what he's capable of. He's got to eliminate that, or at minimum, just limit that from his game. Now, the big storyline, guys, sticking with Spencer Rattler, QB1, just how quickly can Rattler grasp a new offensive scheme and an offensive system under new OC Dabble Loggins? I understand they want to pick up where they left off last year, guys. They want to do the same thing. And, hey, we heard the same thing last year after the Duke's Mayo Bowl. But when you have a new OC, you have new verbiage, it is a new system. It is a new scheme. And, guys, you think about what Dabble Loggins wants to do, and South Carolina's not reinventing the wheel when it comes to their offensive scheme. They're going to do a lot of what Marcus Satterfield wanted to do. Granted, based off what they've said, it's going to be simpler. It's not going to be as complex, but it's going to be very similar. But there's new verbiage to learn. Dabble Loggins will bring his own wrinkles over. Shane Beamer and staff will add their own wrinkles. And so Spencer Rattler is once again being asked to learn a new offensive scheme, playbook, verbiage, etc. Is it a quick and easy transition? You have to think it will be. That's got to be priority number one. You can't go into week one not knowing the signals, the lingo, the play calls, whatever it might be. There can be no confusion. You simply cannot afford to do it. There's no grace period. There's no Georgia State or EIU to open up with. You have North Carolina, and your offense better be clicking. But just how quickly do we see sort of a a slow build-up like last year, or is Spencer Rattler in this Gamecocks offense able to hit the ground running from the start this season? And finally, guys, my final storyline on Spencer Rattler. When I look at this guy, a preseason top 5 quarterback in most quarterback rankings. Of course, our friend SEC Mike with that SEC podcast ranked Spencer Rattler 9th in his quarterback rankings. And he asked QB1 about that at SEC Media Days, which I thought he handled the question very professionally. But he has him 9th in his postseason quarterback rankings, which basically means they're not, there are folks out there who aren't expecting Rattler to have a great year. But with that being said, this is the most volatile quarterback in the SEC. This is the most boom or bust quarterback in the conference. Because when he's at his best, he can beat anybody. And I remember going into last season saying, guys, Spencer Rattler is just going to have a Rattler game where he takes over and his talent and his skill is what leads the Gamecocks to victory. I will not be stunned. I actually expect that game to happen again. I would be surprised if we do not see that yet again. But that takes us back to our earlier point. Therein lies the problem. There's too much of one week he's the hero and the next week he's the zero. Boom or bust is a great way to describe Spencer Rattler. And I think it's going to go one way or the other. I think Rattler is either going to be, he's going to show massive improvement, limit the turnovers, build off what he did in the final 3 games of the 2022 season, or it's not going to happen, and he's once again going to be looked at as a bottom third of the SEC quarterback. There are few guys, most guys, I feel like their floors and their ceilings are pretty close. Dude, Spencer Rattler, the spectrum for him is just all over the place. And, of course, for the Gamecocks, they're hoping that it's closer to the best version of himself that we saw in the final 3 games versus those first 10 a season ago. Getting off of QB1, because, again, guys, there are intriguing storylines outside of just Spencer Rattler in this room. We talked a lot about Luke Doty after the spring game and his role on this football team. And it's funny, Shane Beamer at SEC Media Days went as far to say, hey, why is nobody talking about Luke Doty? Don't forget we have Luke Doty. He's played good football for us. He's helped us win ball games. Don't forget about Luke Doty. My question is this, after a rough outing in the spring game, is it safe to say that Luke Doty's still QB2? And I'll say this, after the spring game, we were kind of looking for takes, looking for quote-unquote hot takes or just main takeaways. And, of course, one of my big takeaways was I don't think it's a guarantee that he is QB2, and I don't know how you could convince me that he's QB2 after the spring game. Well, we've had time to process since then, and I will say, I think because of experience alone, Luke Doty is going to be QB2 when this thing kicks off. And it is a valuable thing to have a guy like a Luke Doty as a backup. I mean, Luke Doty's not a guy where, hey, Lenoris Sellers had to be thrust in there at QB2, and God forbid Spencer Rattler, gets banged up and has to come out for a series or two. You don't necessarily have to turn it over to a true freshman. You have a guy in Luke Doty who has started a lot of games for you. He's won some games. We all recall 2021 and, what he did. And, he's played some quality football for you. So having a guy like that, having a serviceable backup, that's a pretty solid position to be in. How much does he realistically play? And that's why, guys, the majority of the storylines in this room revolve around Spencer Rattler, because it's all about Spencer Rattler this season. This team's going to go as far as 7 takes them, with all due respect to everyone else in the quarterback room. But having a guy like Luke Doty, it is a plus. It's a plus anytime you have that serviceable backup, and certainly Luke Doty does service that. I just wonder, while he may be QB2, is he the quarterback in that room that gets the second most reps? With that being said, we move to the freshman phenom, Lenoris Sellers. How much of an impact does Lenoris Sellers make as a true freshman? We have heard so many great things about this kid. Tons of pressure on him to succeed, live up to the hype, be the guy in the future. The great thing is for this year, though, he can be groomed under Spencer Rattler. He can learn. He can observe. But with talking to folks behind the scenes, Lenoris Sellers is going to make an impact, and make an impact this year. We saw the athleticism in the spring game and what he can do. You know, I think it was best summarized in that play where I believe it was snapped over his head. He picks it up, rolls out, throws on the run. I mean, he showed the arm strength. He showed the composure. He showed the agility in that spring game as well, the athleticism. I mean, he's an absolute monster. What, 6'5", 240, something like that. Really, really big kid. He's a physical specimen. And especially for a South Carolina football team that is looking for some answers and some help in the run game, I think Lenoris Sellers absolutely could be an answer that this football team desperately needs. How much of an impact? How early do we see Sellers? Is it off of game one? Do we see Sellers right off the jump? Do they wait a little bit later in the season? Do they try to get him in, against a Furman or some of the smaller games before they thrust him in against big-time SEC competition? Or is it one of those things where the Lenoris Sellers package is there from the jump and it's here to stay? Also, how do you balance is preserving the red shirt for Lenoris Sellers? Is that a big deal, or is it something you don't really care about? It'll be fascinating to watch how they utilize him and his skill set this season. And finally, guys, as you look at the rest of the room, I say this: what does the future hold for guys like Tanner Bailey, Colton Gauthier? Not just this season, but you look ahead, the addition of Dante Reno is looming. What do those guys do? It's crazy to think. I mean, Tanner Bailey was a blue chip prospect out of the state of Alabama. Colton Gauthier, we've talked a lot about him. It's somewhat surprising he's still on the roster, but to each their own. And, of course, Braden Davis hit the transfer portal just a couple of months ago. So I just wonder, I mean, I don't expect to see those guys play. And, guys, I keep very conservative expectations when it comes to seeing any of these youngsters play because, I went into last year thinking, okay, Tanner Bailey, Braden Davis, they'll get in there in garbage time when South Carolina's up 45-0 on South Carolina State or Charlotte or in any other game, and it never happened. Those guys didn't take a single snap for South Carolina a season ago. So, what does the future hold? Do we see any Tanner Bailey, God forbid, Colton Gauthier? And again, with Dante Reno on the way, a 4-star quarterback out of the state of Massachusetts, what does the future hold for those guys? So, guys, in regards to quarterback, it's a talented room. It's a deep room. And when you're talking about storylines, it all comes back to QB1, Spencer Rattler. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling in regards to the Gamecocks quarterbacks heading into the 2023 football season. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. Going to appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Like I mentioned, a busy show today. We got our Q&A Power Hour upcoming in hour number 3. JC Shurburtt will join us at 1:15, of course, to talk all things Gamecocks. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep this conversation rolling as we're talking South Carolina quarterbacks as our position unit preview series begins. Which Gamecocks quarterback has the most to prove in this upcoming season? And let me throw out this disclaimer, by the way. We do most to prove and best overall for each position unit. We'll touch on best overall tomorrow. I really try to pick different players for the most part for those two distinctions because it just gives us more to talk about. It's fun to talk about. Obviously, there's some things, you could look at Spencer Rattler. He has a lot to prove, not just to South Carolina, but for himself, to the NFL. You could look at a guy like Luke Doty as the backup. He's got a lot to prove that when he gets his opportunity, he is a serviceable option. Colton Gauthier proving that he deserves a spot on the roster. Tanner Bailey, same thing. All these guys have something to prove. But for the sake of the conversation, which quarterback on this Gamecocks roster has the most to prove this season? And again, while you could sit and talk about Spencer Rattler, is it he has a lot to prove or he just has to live up to his potential? He just has to be more consistent, as we spoke on earlier. I think that's understood. When I look at this quarterback room, the player that jumps out to me with the most to prove, not just because of he will be utilized this year, but also for the sake of the future of the quarterback position in Columbia. My attention turns to the freshman, Lenoris Sellers. This is a guy with big-time upside. It was huge when South Carolina flipped him from Syracuse. And a guy, you talk to folks in the recruiting industry, they all feel like he was a very slept-on, underrated player. Many have said if he had the senior season he had as a junior, he would have been a 5-star prospect. You look at what he did for South Florence. He threw for 2,948 yards, 45 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He ran for 1,338 yards and 17 touchdowns. This all in his senior season, by the way, as he led the Bruins to a 4A state championship. He was a finalist for the state's Mr. Football. He was named Offensive MVP in the Shrine Bowl of the Carolinas. After leading the Sandlappers to a win by completing 9 of 13 passes for 121 yards and 1 touchdown, he also ran for 41 yards on 12 carries in that game. He was ranked the 4th best prospect in the state, the 16th best quarterback in the country, and the 246th overall player in the 24/7 Sports composite. So you factor all that in. And also, again, you factor in that had he had that season, as I just mentioned, as a junior, probably would have been a 5-star prospect when you factor in those stats, but also the measurables. I mean, this is a dude standing tall at 6'5", 240 pounds, I believe it is. He's listed at 6'3", 245 on the official roster. I believe, though, in the latest roster in the media guide, around 6'4", 250. Either way, he's a physical specimen, and he is a guy, as we've talked about, that can make an immediate impact as a freshman. Different packages, throwing the football, change of pace quarterback, sort of, anytime you're getting compared, guys, to Tim Tebow, there's pressure. And he's being compared in the sense of the Gamecocks could use him the same way Florida used Tim Tebow back in 2007. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. Tons of pressure is being applied. And pressure's a good thing, right? Pressure makes diamonds. But you have to keep in mind he is a true freshman. How does he handle that pressure? That's why there's so much to prove here, because Just because you've got the stars or the recruiting profile, we've seen it before, it doesn't mean, it's not a guarantee it'll translate to the field. And I think using 2023, whatever role he's in, whether he plays in all 13 games or he plays in 2 or 3, this is such a pivotal year for the quarterback position at South Carolina. Not just Spencer Rattler. I mean, that's a given, right? Spencer Rattler playing well and leading South Carolina to a successful season. But we talked about this last year because I think we all assumed Rattler was going to be a one and done, right? He was going to be 1 year and out. And so you thought to yourself about the future of the quarterback position. I thought it was important to get guys like Tanner Bailey and Braden Davis and maybe even Luke Doty on the field in some garbage time action or whatever action they could find. That did not happen, and Spencer Rattler, thankfully, has returned. You don't play for the future this season necessarily. That's not at all what I'm implying. But, for example, let's say week 2 against Furman. It's 49-0 South Carolina in the third quarter. Let's just say that happens, just for fun. You're going to be pulling your starters. And who do I want getting experience? Who do we want getting experience? Luke Doty or a guy in Lenora Sellers that I think most of us believe is the quarterback of the future? If South Carolina's up big in some games like that, or guys, even if they're down big, God forbid, you need to think about the future of the quarterback position because that's going to be a question mark this time next year. Shane Beamer and company are going to be looking around saying, who is our starting quarterback? Who is QB1? I wouldn't be surprised if it's a situation where that battle goes into the fall. Guys like Lenora Sellers, Luke Doty, Dante Reno, all battling it out. Tanner Bailey. But using 2023 to set himself up, Lenora Sellers that being, set himself up to be that QB1 in 2024. I think it's a situation, guys. He's going to be used. The packages, while they may be limited, could be very impactful. I mean, we're talking about, I think Lenora Sellers, guys, realistically could be a guy, makes a difference in a ball game or two this season. This kid has so much to prove because of the expectations set or on him, put on him, coming in as a true freshman. The expectations set on him coming out of the spring game when he showed that athleticism, that skill set, that made him such a highly touted recruit. And the pressures and expectations set on him going into this season for when he gets his opportunity to not be a polished product because he's a true freshman, but to continue to show signs that this is our guy of the future. And I think what could become a really interesting storyline later in the season, there's no guarantees that Spencer Rattler plays in South Carolina's bowl game. I mean, this is a guy, again, we're expecting middle of day 2 being taken in the NFL draft. If that's the situation, the way we see opt-outs now in college football, it could be Lenora Sellers that this football team is turning to. So using 2023 as a springboard, I'm not trying to write off Luke Doty, write off Tanner Bailey, write off Dante Reno. But I think most of us are convinced that if he's able to grasp the offensive playbook, if he's able to adjust to college life, adjust to the college game, Lenora Sellers has every skill necessary to be the next big-time quarterback at the University of South Carolina. And when you have those type of expectations, that type of hype, it leads you to a point where you have the most to prove. And that, my friends, is why I believe when you look at this Gamecocks quarterback room, it's the highly heralded true freshman, Lenora Sellers, that has the most to prove going into this 2023 football season. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll get my good friend JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur on the show to talk all things Gamecocks. Going to have a lot of fun talking with JC. You guys stay tuned. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, hold Dougie, hold. Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, what's up, guys? We're back here on this Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. I appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. The position unit preview series is officially underway, guys. Again, we'll continue it tomorrow and wrap up the quarterbacks. We will talk best overall. Season will be successful if, and I'll give my overall grade for the Gamecocks quarterbacks going into the 2023 football season. So we're cramming a lot of content in a short amount of time, and we're going to do that for each and every single position group of the Gamecocks football team. Really excited for it, guys. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, the love, the support. Got JC Shurburtt up coming in the next minute or so. We have a ton to discuss after last week. You guys might recall the Wi-Fi in the Airbnb was so shoddy that we were unable to have the conversation. So anyways, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you so much for the continued love and support. The South Carolina, North Carolina trash talk is getting going on social media. Love to see it. Absolutely love to see it. Again, let me say this, y'all. Thank y'all so much again for the love and support. Like I mentioned, I know a lot of times things get crazy on social media, some of the madness that takes place, and it always feels good to know that the love far outweighs the hatred or the disdain or the negativity. It's the positivity and the love and the support that really trumps it all when you keep things in perspective and you realize what really matters and you know, you pay attention to the right thing. So thank you all so much again. It would not be possible to do what we do or do what we're going to be doing very, very soon. TSUS would not be what it is and what it's becoming without your love and support. So again, thank you all so much. I truly do appreciate it. And yeah, really, really excited to continue along with the content and get JC on. By the way, guys, do not forget the season simulation series continues as we take on the Georgia Bulldogs. Got a big win last night. We're sitting at 1-1. Made some major offensive changes, changed up the playbook, went full air raid. Spencer Rattler throws for 440 yards. Sloppy ball game. Should have been a much greater margin of victory. But, you know, we got the job done either way. And I tell you this, I saw somebody ask earlier, man, went in the locker room, had a talk with the defense. We were actually trailing at halftime, 21-17. Trailing at halftime, talked to the guys, got our heads out of our asses. Defense stepped up in the second half. Got a big challenge tonight, though, in Athens. So, going to be a tough one, but we did beat Georgia in the simulation last year. Don't forget that. We did beat Georgia in that simulation. By the way, also really, really excited to announce I'll be going on AYS Sports with my guy Blake Ruffino tonight. Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports. We'll chat tonight at 8:30 right after the simulation. So, going to be a lot of fun, guys. I mean, the conversations, the content truly bleeding out of the eyeballs, and I'm always grateful for the opportunity to talk ball, and it's always a lot of fun. Yes, Brendan, thank you for correcting me. Tebow in 06. Thank you, sir. Yes. Got my years messed up. 07 was when Tebow won the Heisman. 06 was when they used the freshman Tim Tebow. Chris Leak was the Gators' starting quarterback. So my apologies for the mess up there. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Always leave it to Brendan M. to hold us accountable here. I feel like Brendan M. at this point is like the low-key editor of TSUS. Anything that's messed up, whether it be content-wise, it be technical issues, Brendan M. is on top of it. So thank you, Brendan. I appreciate that. I need somebody to do it. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. We got tons of questions, comments rolling again. We're waiting on JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur. They had a huge conversation this morning with Shane Beamer. We'll lead off with that and talk about that Beamer convo and what Coach Shane Beamer had to say to him about everything going on. I'm sure SEC Media Days and just his football team as a whole. So, anyways, waiting on JC Shurburtt. Let's see. In case you missed it, the big news today, Jim Harbaugh could be suspended 4 games for false statements to the NCAA. Wild. I think it was like lying about hamburgers or something like that. Something that was just felt very not a big deal. And he might get 4 game suspension, and Tennessee gets a slap on the wrist. I know our Tennessee haters, our resident Tennessee haters, they are feeling some type of way today. We got a lot of questions in recruiting as well. A lot of questions in recruiting about Jonathan Paylor. What is the other one? King Thomas. What is his name? King Joseph Edwards. I got a lot of questions about recruiting too. Again, that's why I'm excited to talk with JC, or one of the reasons, because it's just, I think it was Dante Reno that said July was going to be a massive month. And it still could be. We got 6 days to go, but starting to run out of time. starting to run out of time, guys. Like, if those recruits are going to come in by end of July, running out of time. Of course, the Carolina Cookout taking place this weekend, which it feels like if a player comes to your cookout, it seems like fans basically just assume that player, and a lot of guys I would expect, will commit this weekend. I'd just be flat out stunned if you didn't get some welcome homes this weekend. I'd be flat out stunned, man. I'd be flat out stunned if you didn't. Anyways, guys, thank y'all so much for the continued love and support. We wait on JC Shurburtt. Not sure where JC is right now. We await his arrival. I guess I could have went a little bit longer on either way. There he is. Okay, we're going to get him in here, guys. Like I mentioned, every single Tuesday he joins the show, and really excited to chat because, of course, last week our conversation got cut short because I was on the road at SEC Media Days, and the internet and the Airbnb just simply would not allow it. But we get him back on the show. JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur. He joins us once again. JC, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Hey, good to be with you today. Glad everybody's internet's working well. Certainly been a busy morning on my end. We had Shane Beamer on JC and Morgan for a nice interview, and then had the show, and then I had some internet issues, and I popped out on the show like late, and just got those resolved. So glad to be back with you.
Well, JC, again, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and glad we're able to chat. Obviously, I hated that last week we couldn't chat until Thursday on Inside the Gamecocks, which I look forward on going to again later this week. But let's start there, man. You mentioned, I saw this morning, JC and Morgan, you guys had Shane Beamer on the airwaves, and obviously highly encourage everyone that's hearing the sound of my voice or tuned in live right now to go check that out. But can you give us any highlights of what Shane Beamer had to say to you and Mike Morgan as well?
Yeah, this is the second time he's come on with us. And of course, he remembers Mike from when he was here and stuff. Mike kind of set it up, but he called me yesterday. He's like, Shane's coming on tomorrow. I'm like, Shane who? And like Beamer. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. But no, it was a great conversation. One of the things I thought that was interesting was he said he just got out of a meeting with Lonnie Teasley and Greg Atkins about the offensive line. And that's just such a critical position. And, I think they went over right here before camp, who's going to be trained where, that kind of thing. Of course, a lot of it's kind of trial and error at that particular position, and then you have to gel and all that. I did get a chance to ask him about Jackson Hughes and Nene Manziel, the 2 walk-ons from Mercer and Charlotte. These aren't really your typical walk-ons, Chris. These guys have played a lot of college football. It's just been at the non-Power 5 level. You're talking about 2 starters. Manziel's an in-state kid from Pendleton, up there in what they call it, the Golden Triangle, up that area. Where Brad Johnson was from there, but and then Hughes was a starter at left tackle for Charlotte. So I think those guys can can help fill some gaps on the offensive line. It wouldn't shock me to see one of them start, especially Hughes. I think it all kind of depends on Tyshawn Wanamaker and what kind of fall camp he has, and Ja'Kai Moore, and kind of how they piece it together. But I think those two are going to give them some flexibility, without having to go and play freshmen that aren't ready. Now, freshmen, I do think Marquis Anderson and Trovon Ball will play this year, or will be in the two deep at some point. So he said that, he kind of reiterated too about the Clemson game last year and how that was such a good turning point in the program because, and I pointed this out and he corrected me because I forgot about the Auburn game in 2021. Really, in the Beamer era, there's only been like 3 times where Carolina didn't get off to such a good start and then they came back and won. One was East Carolina, which Coach Beamer always points to as a turning point, pulling that one out. The second one was Auburn in 2021. And then, of course, Clemson last year, the biggest stage of them all. To do that and to respond like they did against a team that's rubbed their nose in it for that long, when they could have easily just said, as Beamer said, oh, well, we beat Tennessee, so we're good. That shows you something. And I think that win probably went a much further way in terms of belief than a night like Tennessee where everything just goes right. Mm-hmm. That Clemson game, everything went wrong, and you still pulled it out and won. And that's what separates winners and losers in this game is like who deals with adversity the best. And I think just from a program standpoint, you can even tell against Notre Dame, as shorthanded as Gamecocks were, how confident they played in that contest. So I think that, I think everybody's going to point to Tennessee as being a turning point if this thing turns and goes in a great direction. I think it's already turned. It's just a matter of heading in the right direction. But something tells me that Clemson game may be a lot more important just because of how it unfolded than maybe people think.
Certainly, JC could serve as the springboard going in the 2023 season. JC, side note, did he mention anything about when fall camp will begin? I'm assuming next week. Did he mention players report, fall camp, or do you have any?
Now, I'm told they probably get a date on that tomorrow at the Birdies. They have this thing with the media called Birdies with Beamer, and they got to play golf. It's the media golf outing. They have it every year. Yeah. Did Will Muschamp? I think Will Muschamp had it too. Did Will Muschamp have a golf tournament?
Mulligans with Muschamp? I don't know. I don't know if he did.
Mulligans with Muschamp. I don't know. Boom. But he probably had a long drive contest, right?
Bogeys with Boom. I don't know.
Bogeys with Boom, but nah, they probably just saw one on the driving range and pounded Miller Lite and see how far they can hit it. Yeah. But no, I don't remember if Will had it or not. Maybe Will did, but he didn't play. I don't know, but I know Spurrier wouldn't have missed it. And Beamer now is doing his third year. So most of the time, the John Whittle and Hale and those guys that are actually on the ground covered it for me. They get that information then. But I'm assuming it's going to be around. Let's see, Monday is August 7th. I bet they report and maybe even have like a Friday practice and then come back and it gets rolling the 7th. So I'm going to be in Columbia the 7th anyway. So maybe that's why I'm thinking that. But it's
gotcha.
That's the deal.
So let's stick with Beamer, JC, and talk a little SEC Media Days. Your thoughts on what Coach Beamer had to say. I mean, of course, at these events, you're not going to, probably draw any hard conclusions. And I was mentioning this as well, that, when you follow the Gamecocks or whatever team it is as closely as we do, that he's not going to say anything that we probably have not heard yet. The big thing to me, JC, that, Shane Beamer mentioned was just the amount of new players on this roster, 38 new players from the end of last season. Mentioned that freshmen are going to play at every single position. So that was something that sort of jumped out at me. But anything major takeaways from SEC Media Days, whether it was Shane Beamer, Spencer Rattler, Kai Kroger, Tonka Hemingway, anything that stood out to you from the Gamecocks at Media Days in Nashville?
I thought Spencer Rattler was pretty focused and it seemed like he had a pretty serious demeanor about him. And, I kind of feel for the kid because I think it's one of the most unfair things human beings do now that we have all this technology is continue to stay stuck in the past or people's past or, nobody can ever make a mistake. And that stuff kind of just follows you around. And, it's nothing against the media. They have to ask it, but, that kind of stuff just followed him, Oklahoma, this, that, and the other. And, he's a different person now. And I thought he was very dialed in. I thought, Kai Kroger obviously is a punter, and it's neat to talk to a punter sometimes. And then Talking Hemingway was really honest about things and stuff. But as far as Spencer goes, I thought he did a good job. I think Shane, very enthusiastic. The media likes talking to him, hearing him, talk about things and stuff, asking him questions. But I did think he got one of the worst questions in the whole event when somebody that covers, I think, Georgia, decided to continue to make an issue out of the fact the guy has never been an offensive or defensive coordinator. And I thought Shane handled it well by saying, well, I was special teams coordinator or whatever. I mean, the list keeps growing of great coaches that were never offensive or defensive coordinators. Lou Holtz, Urban Meyer. Gamecock fans will remember the late, great Joe Morrison, never an OC or DC. John Harbaugh, who won a Super Bowl, never been an OC or DC. I mean, it's just being a head coach is a different job. And, I don't even know why. I mean, you can look at the guys that are really great coordinators that are horrible head coaches, so I don't know why the job, your entire, you conflate one to the other. But people still want to make an issue of that are complete morons. And I can't even believe that was something that was posed to him. I think it's insulting and not fair and just dumb, irrelevant. I mean, how is that possibly relevant when you're going into year 3?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the questions, JC, were questionable. And there's obviously a lot of pressure when you ask a question to a coach.
Sure.
At SEC. I tried to keep it all football. I mean, I just like
you were great, man.
To me, like what I hated was, for example, Lane Kiffin's in the big room. I get it. People are trying to get their stories. They want to talk about NIL, and they got him because he had a lot to say about the issue. But I'm sitting there like, hey, why not talk about the quarterback room? Let's talk about Quinshon Judkins. Let's talk about the actual football team. But, it's an event for media to get whatever story they need or whatever soundbite they need, which it's fine. It is what it is. But I thought echo your point. I thought that question was also absurd. But I thought Beamer handled it well and thought he was great at the podium. The other thing, JC, that really stood out to me is, hearing him talk about DK Joyner. I really, it's funny. Like you and I, you've been coming on the show for a while now, so we've been following this storyline from the jump. There were rumblings about him moving to running back, and then it's like, oh, well, he's getting reps at running back, and then you saw him in the spring game, and then it's like, and there's rumblings of, oh, well, I think he's probably going to be RB1. And then hearing Shane Beamer talk about him, I'm like, DeCarrion Joyner is going to be a focal point of this offense. Unless he's just blowing smoke, like DeCarrion Joyner is going to be a big part of what they do offensively this year.
I think so. And I think that I can see it, I mean, sometimes, football is based on a range of scenarios, right? And that's how I kind of look at it. And if this, then this, or if this, or if that, it's all a bunch of ifs. And so you don't want to sit there and say, I'm not going to sit there and predict 1,000 yards rushing for DeCarrion this year. Could it happen? I think so. I think he's got to work on some things and, kind of get some confidence going, but I think he's capable of doing that. Same time, I'm not going to say he's not going to factor and be less than 100 yards rushing. It's one of those things where it's kind of the answer is probably somewhere along those points. But I'll say this, sometimes you can't see it. Sometimes you look at a guy and, like, okay, DL Moore, right? Spurrier era wide receiver. Steve Spurrier Jr., love that guy and started him until the day he got kicked off the team for drugs. And I thought he was god awful. I thought he looked like Edward Scissorhands out there trying to catch the football. He was just tall. And he did catch one pass against Georgia and ran it and almost scored. Congrats to him. But, I'm like, and I was kind of wondering, why did you go get a kid from Kentucky to play receiver when Kentucky and Louisville didn't want him? There's nobody in Kentucky. What are you doing? And sure enough, I was right, but I just didn't see it. With like DeCarrion, I see it. I see like, oh, here, all right, 230 pounds. He runs with good pad level. He's physical. He always makes the first guy miss. It's just a matter of going from quarterback to kind of running back, right, and taking the handoff, which is different. But that's I can see it with him, and all. Now, that's not to say trust me, because I've seen it with certain guys and they don't pan out, and I haven't seen it with others and they do. So it's all subjective, but yeah, I definitely see it with the carry on as far as how he could be a really good running back.
JC, before we get off of it, any other SEC Media Day takeaways? The preseason All SEC team. I would like to point out, by the way, I voted Nick Emanwari on my first team All SEC team at the safety position, so it's not my fault he wasn't included on any of the three, which I thought was just insane. I thought it was insane. I also voted Juice Wells first team wide receiver. Listen, Lab McConkey, he's a nice player, man, but he ain't better than Juice Wells. I don't give a damn what team he's on. I don't care. And the Gamecocks picked third in the SEC East, which the media and I agreed. I had the Gamecocks third as well. Any takeaways from that? I'm not going to go as far as some and say that it's like a complete joke now and, it's turning into a clown show, whatever, which is a fair opinion. I mean, 8 people voted for Vandy to win the SEC East, 5 voted for them to win the SEC title. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
But any takeaways from just anything else? It doesn't have to be that, but anything else that stood out from SEC Media Days?
Yeah, that Vandy vote stuff like that happens every year and media days. And I certainly think this year a lot of folks that went, especially from our market, Chris, including yourself, got a lot out of it. I didn't hear the normal rumblings and complainings of having to go up there this year. I think it's a great event for people that know how to get in there and produce content and ask questions. And I also think it's a great event for like broadcast, for like radio. Which is probably what's going to lead me to go into it again. I thought I'd paid my penance for that, but because I just go and write. But it's a good event, and I think that stuff like those votes for Vandy that happens every single year. I mean, there's somebody that votes, some crazy team number one or whatever, and it's just I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I did think it was a big of a deal to not even have Nick Emanwari on the third team. I think that screams a little bit about the media, because I don't know if the coaches' preseason's come out yet or not, Chris, but I couldn't imagine him not being on there. So, yeah, that was a little bit nutty, in my opinion, that he didn't make it. So that if I had a gripe, it would probably be those types of individual selections, which impact individual guys that work very hard.
Now, JC, let's talk recruiting. I feel like that's the hot topic right now. Dante Reno mentioned at the beginning of this month that July is going to be a huge month. Just wait and see. JC, we have 6 days left. And there's a big cookout this weekend, by the way. So welcome homes could be on the way. We'll start with the cookout. I want to get to specific players because I'm getting a lot of questions. Ask him about this guy. Ask him about that guy. But
Sure.
The cookout as a whole, the importance of this weekend, every school has one, it seems. And it's when you zoom out, it's kind of funny, honestly, to like look at this guy's going to that cookout, this guy's coming to our cookout. But it does feel like if you get a guy at your cookout, as funny as it sounds, you have a really good shot of landing him. Just talk about the importance of the weekend. Who are some of the top prospects? I think Dylan Stewart obviously is one of them, but who are the top guys that are on campus that you would say are the most notable that will be attending the cookout?
Well, for 2024, it's obviously going to be Dylan Stewart and then Jalewis Solomon. If somehow they can get Taylor back on campus, great. I don't feel too great about that one right there right now, but that seems to change by the hour. And then Daniel Hill, the 4-star running back from Meridian, Mississippi, from what my contacts tell me, Chris, with the others, they would feel like really crappy if they didn't show up for the cookout. With Hill, not so much because he's halfway across the country almost. So they still feel pretty confident about him. But Jalewis Solomon and Dylan Stewart, I mean, coffee's for closers, man. You got to always be closing if you're recruiting, and getting these two guys in the boat. Those are the ones. And so, if they can get those guys, I think the other two, Hill and Paylor, the Gamecocks can at least split. And if they don't get them, they don't get them. But with Stewart and Solomon, both, I think they're first up at deck first up at bat. One's up at bat, one's on deck. Whatever baseball analogy you want to use, as far as guys that they can seal the deal with this weekend.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll ask you this, JC. Do you see some welcome homes following or falling soon? Because, I mean, the fact of the matter is this. It has been quite a while since South Carolina has secured a blue chip commitment. I mean, it feels like it's been forever, like end of May or something. Like it's been which is not characteristic, I'll say, of Shane Beamer and what he's done in recruiting. So, I mean, do you think it's a situation of, again, the timing just hasn't aligned to where, like, because the view is this: South Carolina started red hot. I mean, as hot as anybody in the country. And as you know as well as I do, it is agonizing for Gamecock fans to watch the arch rivals pick up commitments and to move on up those rankings. And South Carolina just keeps on moving down those. I mean, Gamecocks are what, like 20th now, 22nd? So, I mean, is there relief on the way? Like, I mean, what's the deal?
I think so. Number one, don't pay any. I mean, I understand that. You know, like that's why people argue about star ratings. They don't really care. They just want to rub it in the face of their Clemson buddy. We got this 4-star, you know, whatever. It's the vernacular, it's the language, it's how you talk about recruiting, and that's fine, man. I wouldn't have a job if people weren't passionate about that. But it really normally doesn't have a dang thing to do with how good your class is or not. It really normally just is something for, you know, fans to kind of follow and look at progress and things like that. So I don't think this is anything that, you know, a couple of the commitments from these 4 guys won't solve quickly. And I think the other part of it is South Carolina got off to such a hot start this year. And I told people this, those that really understand recruiting, that aren't just staring at the 59, 52 ranking or whatever, you know, I think at Carolina been waiting on Wendell Gregory and Michael Smith and, you know, and Josiah Thompson and Cam Pringle, and they got all 4 of them. They have huge recruiting momentum right now. But those guys already committed in January and February, so they're not on the board. So you're kind of going fishing in a different pond. So I think, you know, I think that at the end of the day, you know, when you kind of look at it, timing is a big deal. But sure, I'd love to see them get a commitment, especially when you see Georgia and everybody else bringing in guys right now.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, JC, what really matters at the end of the day is how your class looks when you get to December and it's signing day. That's what's most important. Let me ask you about King Joseph Edwards. There's been some chatter about him. He dropped his top 8, I assume. South Carolina's in that, but been a lot of conversation. Apparently, I was told that, you know, you guys on your show were talking about him and his status with the Gamecock. What's the latest? Because I think King Joseph Edwards was a guy that fans were excited about the potential of getting, and you know, now there's some conflicting reports or whatever. What's the status?
I need to really like nail one of my contacts down on this, because I'm going off of it through, I don't want to say secondhand information, but information from someone who should know. So it's their job to know. The Carolina's not really all that interested in him. He doesn't have film, whatever. I'll tell you this: don't number one, nobody out there needs to assume he's a take for the Gamecocks or anybody else. Okay, don't assume that. Don't assume he's not. But you know, I also think that, you know, when you kind of dig into it, this is a guy with not a lot of film at all. This is a guy that's just kind of out there, looks the part, but may not play like it. So it is a heavy risk to take him if you're anybody. Now, if you're Carolina, you say, well, you know, we're striking out all these guys. We'll take him for momentum purposes. That's been done before. And then you just coach him up. You know, you coach him up. But he's probably not. He's probably way more of a name than a player at this point, just because I think a lot of schools have kind of, you know, backed off or would not take, you know, a commitment from him at this point. So would Carolina, I don't want to sit there and shut that completely down, but I doubt it. And I'm going to follow up with that this afternoon.
JC, let me move to a question that our own Austin Gregory in our Discord posed. He said, Chris, can you ask JC about Jonathan Paylor? Curious if the lead shift is due to a genuine push by NC State or if it's an NIL proposal. What can you say on the recruitment of Jonathan Paylor? Obviously, that's one of the priority targets for South Carolina.
Well, I mean, they're one and the same. You know, NIL is part of the recruiting now. So, they're making a push, and they're making a push with NIL, you know. So, I think that has put NC State in good position. This one could go either way, most likely. But it's way, way tighter than the Gamecocks coaching staff would ever have wanted it to be. And there is a legitimate, realistic chance they lose him. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at this point. So, I don't know what happened there. That's a tough pill to swallow because that was kind of one of South Carolina's tickets back into the state of North Carolina, getting a 4-star guy from Burlington. And State's just coming there and, made some deals with him and has him thinking, maybe staying closer to home. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll continue to track it. But right now, I'd be lying if I said it looks great for the Gamecocks.
JC, going to be a really interesting next week or so, especially like this weekend. Like you said, I know you guys will be hard at work tracking the cookout and the commitments. And let me ask you this too, sticking with recruiting, and then I got one more thing for you. How important do you think flipping players is going to be this cycle for South Carolina? Because I feel like that happens, it depends on the cycle. That's not always the case. But do you feel like South Carolina, we see all like the flip season tweets and everything. I mean, a guy commits, and I see Dante Reno tweet flip season.
Flip season.
Right. So, I mean, do you feel like that's going to play a big factor in what South Carolina does in the 2024 cycle?
It could, and it kind of depends on, and I told my folks on the BigSpur.com this. I was like, because everybody wants a cookie cutter answer to recruiting success or not recruiting success. And it's never, number one, it's never just one thing. It's usually a primary thing and other factors. So everybody's like, well, what about, NIL, getting more NIL money together, NIL's killing it. And, well, not everything's NIL. And so then the other people that want to blame just straight up blame the coaches and they think, NIL is something that doesn't even exist. They're going to take another route on it. If you say something else, but it's usually, a couple of things combined there. But that said, with the flip, it depends on why they ultimately did it. I mean, if you ultimately committed to NC State because of money, that money's not going to change. You probably already started spending some of that money. Not saying that they did, not saying that they didn't, but they probably already started. I mean, so it makes it harder to flip you. Same thing with Adams and Virginia Tech, considering it's the home team, and then you have the whole thing with Jonathan Paylor if he commits, to NC State. He sat there and told you for a year you were his leader and told everybody you were his leader. And then just went back on it at the last minute. Is that somebody you really want in your football program? So, those are kind of the decisions and discussions I think that they'll take in place when they're talking about maybe going and flipping a player. My guess would be based on the feedback is Adams maybe, if he would come into play or something, but maybe not Paylor if that was the case.
JC, I don't know if you noticed, but the dog's curious to hear what you have to say. So he's just kind of taking over the live here. He's creeping right here in the bottom of the screen. JC Shurburtt, the Big Spur. Last thing, JC, College Game Day is headed to Charlotte, North Carolina. Your thoughts on that? Obviously, it's fantastic exposure for the Gamecocks football program. And, I think when you look at the week 1 slate and the games that are on Saturday, obviously we get LSU, Florida State, but that's on Sunday. I think when you look at the matchup, the quarterback matchup, what's on the line, a pair of top 25 teams most likely, I think it made sense that College Game Day will be attending this game. And, of course, Charlotte will put on a great show. But your thoughts on just what it means for the South Carolina program, the exposure, and, of course, the game itself.
Well, it was the first time since 2013 the Gamecocks have been on Game Day. I think North Carolina, South Carolina, and Charlotte – having that type of pregame atmosphere and having it a night game and a border battle and all that is probably what everybody envisioned when they decided to do this. Instead, we got 5:30 kickoffs on a Thursday night. You got a scorching red hot, stadium for 2 of them with North Carolina. I mean, it just, I think it works at night. I think it works with game day. And I think it's a good thing to be showcased because, it's the Battle of the Carolinas in Charlotte. So overwhelmingly positive for the program. I just need to find, some people to get some flags together for me to go out there and fly them during the show. But I do think that it's a tremendous opportunity because of just the spotlight that's on your team in that first week where the spotlight is on the sport, perhaps more than any other weekend out of the year.
JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur joins us every single Tuesday. JC, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Looking forward to chatting with you guys on Inside the Gamecocks on Thursday. Take care.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Chris. Take care, man. Congrats on all the great coverage for Media Days, man. You did a great job, and looking forward to talking to you on Thursday.
I appreciate y'all, man. Thank you, JC. Appreciate the kind words.
Thanks.
Great stuff from JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur. Does a fantastic job, guys. We're going to jump into a quick break, but on the other side, we're going to open it up for your questions, your comments, your calls as our Power Hour begins. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Watch your Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, I'm back here on this Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in here on this Tuesday as our Q&A Power Hour gets underway. We're taking your questions, comments, calls at 843-790-3377. Those phone lines are open. You can also text that number as well. I want to say thank you to JC Shurburtt for taking the time to chat. Always great conversation and really fun to pick his brain about the recruiting side of things. I mean, you guys know, admittedly, I like recruiting. I've never really been a recruiting diehard. So to be able to talk to JC Shurburtt and really get in the nitty-gritty of recruiting and, you know, what's going on, who's a take, who isn't, like where guys are going is a lot of fun. And, you know, I know Gamecock fans, man, we're itching. We're itching to see the next blue chip prospect fall. And my guy Brendan points out we just got 2 4-stars this month with Fuller and Johnson. Brendan, those players, when they committed, were 3 stars. That's all I'm saying. I understand what you're saying. They got bumped up, and that's fantastic. That's great. We have not gotten a blue chip announcement where it was a 4-star prospect throughout the entire process. We have not gotten that in quite a while. Am I wrong or am I right? And I'm not saying, obviously, I think Fuller and Johnson could be great players. I'm just making the point that the recruiting momentum has slowed. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pick it back up this weekend. I mean, I listen, at the end of the day, I trust Shane Beamer when it comes to recruiting. Bottom line, I trust Shane Beamer when it comes to recruiting. I trust he's going to get the dudes that South Carolina needs. But when it comes to this 2024 recruiting class, recruiting cycle, it's been interesting. A lot of momentum up front, hit a lull. And South Carolina's waiting on that next big blue chipper to fall. I stand by that statement. I understand that, again, Johnson, Fuller, both bumped up in the ratings. Those ratings matter now. I'm not only paying attention to it then. They're 4-star guys now. I'm just saying that I stand by what I said. Glad to see them get bumped up. Glad to see them get bumped up. We think they'll be 4 stars when they sign Brendan, but they can get knocked down just as easily as they can get bumped up. The cock drop does exist. Okay, let's get into your questions. Again, I trust Shane Beamer with recruiting, guys. I don't have worries in recruiting. You know, I think I will say this, though, when it comes to recruiting. I will say this. And there's a long way to go. South Carolina's class will rapidly change before we get to signing day. I don't think it was ever fair after the hot start. I don't think it was ever fair to expect South Carolina to have a top 5 recruiting class, maybe not even top 10. But the good thing for Shane Beamer early on in this process, he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to recruit at that level at this point. As long as he's hauling in top 20 classes, I think South Carolina is in a really, really good place. Because guess what, guys? You can win 8 to 9 games a year with top 20 classes. Heck, I think you can even scratch double-digit wins with top 20 classes. You're going to have to coach guys up, but you can win some ball games with that level of talent. And I think as you win more and as you build your program further, those classes are going to continue to get better and better and better and better. And so I don't put a limiting belief on Shane Beamer that he can't get South Carolina to a point where they're recruiting at a top 10 level consistently. But that's going to take, I think, winning over a long period of time, say 5, 6, 7 years. South Carolina is going to have to establish themselves as a program here to stay, as a program on the rise. That's why this season is so important. Because if you slip back to 6 wins and kind of go back to being just back to old Carolina, it's going to be really tough to overcome that. I mean, we already know the Gamecocks are fighting battles in NIL, and I'm not going to dive into that, the specifics, but I think winning on the field is the best thing South Carolina can do right now to help the recruiting. I really do. Because they've got everything else. They've got the facilities. They've got a great head coach in Shane Beamer. They've got NIL. I mean, they have everything to offer a big-time prospect. It's just all about showing these guys that you're going to be able to come here. Your talents will be showcased. You're going to play at the highest level. You're going to compete for championships. A lot of those top prospects, they want to go where the getting's good. The getting's good where you're winning. So I think winning on the field, that is the number one thing the Gamecocks can do to help out the recruiting right now. Having a good 2023 season, that is the best thing South Carolina can do to help their recruiting right now for this cycle and next as well. So, go find some joy, he says. Go get a clue, Slapdick. Brendan, that felt good. I haven't called somebody, and specifically you, a slapdick in quite some time. I have not called someone a slapdick in a while. Reset the count. 0 days. 0 days. 0 days. Anyways, let's get back into your questions. Lots of questions here. Jeff Gullett said, hey, Chris, Jeff with ESPN, can you talk to us about what you told your team during halftime? What adjustments you made to hold firm into 0 points in the second half? Yeah, Jeff, we just coached them up, looked at the film. No, that was funny, man. The sim tonight against Georgia will be very, very, very interesting. That is for sure. Let's see. Austin Gregory had some issues with Colin Anthony of the Mazodcast. We are Mizzou. Yo. Yeah, Austin Gregory was not thrilled with that. Let's see. Austin Hicks said, this dude sounds like an idiot talking about the Mizzou guy. And the textbook said the Missouri game may not be an easy game, but it is time for South Carolina to win one against them. Guys, I fully expect that South Carolina is going to be the underdog in that Mizzou game. I fully expect it. Think about it. Why would the Gamecocks be the favorite, realistically? Unless South Carolina has started 4-1. How many games will they have played again? You will have, that's week 8 of the season, so you'll have played 6 games. So, unless you're 4-2, which you very well could be. But, guys, Mizzou's opening slate is as manageable as it gets. If they're also 4-2 or 5-1, Missouri's going to be that favorite in that game. 4-game winning streak against South Carolina, and at home, the Gamecocks will be road underdogs. I feel fairly confident in saying that. Austin Hicks says, we've had a rough few years due to coaching, but Missouri and South Carolina aren't brother schools. We have the ability to be a top-tier team. They don't. See, Austin, I think what's really, and Austin says South Carolina is a much bigger team. I think what's really, really fascinating, though, is to hear different perspectives. I think South Carolina is better set up to be a top-tier team, as you mentioned. But it's interesting to hear the differing perspectives because, what happens is, and this is not just the Gamecocks fan base, it's every fan base out there. See, a lot of these fans put themselves in an echo chamber. And that's the people you see getting pissed off at me on social media. Those people specifically, they're in an echo chamber where they only hear things they want to hear. They only hear narratives they want to hear. They only hear the messaging they want to hear. And if it's anti-South Carolina or not even anti-South Carolina, but if it's controversial, if it's critical, and that can be Auburn, that can be Alabama, that could be Georgia, that could be Tennessee, there's a 10% of every fan base that has themselves in that echo chamber. And they only want to hear things that are pro their school. But I enjoy hearing these other perspectives because what you realize is this. What you realize, if you sit down and you're honest with yourself, guys, there are some things that separate fan bases from others, but every fan base is the same. For the most part, every single SEC fan bases, they have more similarities than people want to admit. Whether that be Gamecock and Tennessee fans, Missouri fans, Kentucky fans, there are similarities between every single fan base. Every single fan base has passion. They all love their team. They all believe their team's the best. They all feel like their team is the team on the up and up. So that's why it's, again, very interesting to hear the differing perspective. And I mentioned the echo chamber stuff because those in that 10%, they will not allow that conversation. What I'm saying right now, allowing different perspectives, it's a hater. You're being a hater because I get the I get the questions of, why would you talk to this person that has a critical opinion on South Carolina? Well, maybe it's just because I'm wired to do what I do, but I like hearing the differing perspectives because I think it gives you insight into, for example, Georgia's on a different level, but Tennessee, Carolina, Missouri, Kentucky, hell, you could even say Florida. The fan bases of those teams all believe their team is going to have a big season. They all believe their team is the one on the up and up. They believe their team is the one on the rise. They believe their team is the one second best in the SEC. And they can't all be right. They can't all be right. So it's really neat. And that's why I asked him. I said, I hear from Gamecocks all the time, we should never lose to Mizzou. This is a game that South Carolina should win every year. What's the Missouri perspective? And I thought it was fascinating. I really thought it was fascinating to hear him speak so honestly and bluntly on South Carolina. And guys, to be fair, if the roles were reversed and South Carolina had beaten Mizzou 4 times in a row, Gamecock fans would be saying exactly what he's saying. Or what he said. So I just think it's fascinating, honestly. I think it's fascinating. Back to the questions. Ethan said, my honest opinion is that Missouri and Texas A&M have never been big enough brands for the SEC. Texas and Oklahoma are. I think Texas A&M, my friend, is a pretty damn big brand. I mean, Ethan, I think Texas A&M is a bigger brand than South Carolina. Would you disagree? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that. Frank says, we are our record. 4 straight losses. If you were on the other side, I have to imagine you would think you were the better team. Yeah, I mean, listen, right now going into this year, Eli Drinkwitz owns South Carolina. Missouri owns South Carolina. The Gamecocks can change that. There's no doubt, but anybody out there right now that's touting South Carolina as a better football team than Missouri, you're just blinded by your garnet and black glasses because there's no football reasons to point out why South Carolina is better. I know the Gamecocks had a better record. I understand how they finished. You've lost 4 in a row to them, man. I mean, I don't know. It ends there. It ends there. That convo ends there. You've lost 4 in a row. Losing 1, that can be a one-off. Even losing 2, you could write off as a bad run. But you lose 4 in a row? I mean, right now, they're the better team than you. That's it. Bottom line, that's it. You have to beat them to change that narrative. Anyways, we're talking a lot about Missouri here on the show. Justin Bryant said this is the strongest quarterback room since 2013. I think you could agree. I think there's a fair argument there. When you look at what they have with all the blue chip guys and you add in a Lenora Sellers and his potential, I think that's very fair. I think that's very fair for sure. Let's see. Austin says, see Philly hot seat talks are heating up this morning after a rather slow start yesterday. I don't disagree, man. We were down at halftime to Furman. Can you imagine? I don't even want to bring it up. I was going to say in real life, there's no way though. I don't see that. Let's see. Let me get back into your questions here. We talked a lot about quarterbacks today. Braddock 843. I said it before. Spencer is Bitcoin. That's a great way to phrase it, man. Very volatile. High upside, very volatile. Braddock says, I'm actually curious to see how Satterfield does in Nebraska. Braddock, I'll say this, and I'm sure you guys saw it on Sunday. I posed let's hear your honest opinion on Marcus Satterfield. I was very surprised. There are a number of people out there who think Marcus Satterfield had a lot to do with the end of season success and that maybe he wasn't all that bad that he's made out to be. Because you have the majority that say this guy's terrible, he's a pariah, he's going to suck at Nebraska. There were some Gamecock fans I saw in the comments saying, it just didn't work out, but he's not a bad OC. I was very – that surprised me a little bit. That surprised me a little bit. Hunter Kelly says that Sellers will be QB2. Coach Ford says Sellers needs all the reps he can get. He is clearly QB2. Also says, and Coach Ford, by the way, it's great to see you. Sellers goes into 2024 as QB1, but he has a proving ground spring and fall against Bailey and Reno. I think that's fair. Coach Ford, this is all about Rattler and Sellers. Bailey will either beat out Sellers in practice or he will have to wait until next year. Braddock843 says Lenoris is a baller. Hunter Kelly, we've seen enough of Doty. We need Sellers as QB2. A damn beast. What's up, man? What's going on? Appreciate you tuning in. My guy, a damn beast in the building. Jeff Gullidge says, when it comes to the next great quarterback, I'm a wait-and-see guy. Been burnt in thinking we have our guy too many times before they have to prove it to me. Jeff, listen, that's fair. That's fair, man. For a while, it was the joke of all the quarterbacks down the list of, Helinski, Colin Hill, Jake Bentley, Brandon McElwain, Perry Orth, Connor Mitch. The list goes on and on and on. Coach Ford, based on spring games, Sellers is QB2, and he needs any live reps we can in 2024, not just mop up against Furman. It's Rattler against Sellers. Bailey and Reno can duke it out in the spring and fall of 24. Doty needs to move to wide receiver, he says. What do y'all think? Luke Doty to receiver? I think you're set enough, Coach Ford, that you don't need him out there. But, listen, what was my take after the spring game again? I stick by it, too, that I don't think Luke Doty will ever start a game for the University of South Carolina at quarterback ever again. I don't, in the sense of, hopefully he doesn't this year, because if he does, something's gone horribly wrong. I don't think Luke Doty will ever be the guy under center for South Carolina ever again. I think his time as being a starting quarterback is over, and, it's unfortunate, and it is what it is, but, and that's another side, guys, of NIL that maybe we haven't discussed. How much of an impact do you think NIL has on keeping guys at a school like South Carolina, where it's like they could go to a smaller school and start and play, but the getting's probably pretty good at South Carolina when it comes to NIL? Let's jump to the phone lines.
Call from
Will from Dirty Myrtle.
Will, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Good, man. Just wanted to call and give a quick opinion on this whole Missouri thing y'all are talking about. One, I think it rubbed everybody a little bit the wrong way whenever that guy said basically nobody's worried about our offense. I would find that hard to believe, considering we put up 60-plus points against Tennessee. I can't remember the last time Missouri has scored that many against the SEC school. Secondly, I will agree in this sense that I think Missouri's been in the SEC since, 2011?
12.
Was there any
2012.
year? 11, 12? Okay. Did they go to the SEC championship game twice?
Twice. Yes, twice. Mm-hmm.
Twice. So they've been more times than we have in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to say that they are not a little bit – who was it, Austin, that said that they're not as much of a top-end program or whatever. They've
Right.
really kind of gone farther than we have in that sense. Now, I do think we have the facilities and the resources to be a much better program than them. But currently standing, it's really hard to say that. You know what I mean?
Listen, Will,
Will,
I think everything you're saying is very fair and valid, and I think it's uncomfortable conversations that Gamecock fans don't want to have. Because as I mentioned at SEC Media Days when I talked with, cousin Shane and Mike on that SEC podcast about the Missouri game, and I told him, and I believe this still, South Carolina fans look at Mizzou as beneath South Carolina. They look at Mizzou as beneath South Carolina. They look at Kentucky as beneath South Carolina. And my friend, I hate to tell you, but that's just not the case anymore. Like, you got, if you put it into tiers, you've got Georgia, Bama, and LSU right now all at the top. In the next tier, you've got teams like South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, Tennessee's in there. These middle of the pack SEC teams. There are so many middle of the pack SEC teams. That's what makes the conference so great. And the parity is that there are so many teams in this conference that things go wrong. Ball bounces the wrong way a couple times. They could go 5-7 or 6-6. Ball bounces the right way a couple times. They could go 9-3. South Carolina's in that category. But I hate to tell everybody this. South Carolina is not a step or two above Kentucky. They're not a step or two above Mizzou. At one point, maybe, but you have to give those programs credit over the last 10, 15 years, the way they've built their programs. What Mark Stoops has done in his time, what Missouri has done since they've joined the SEC. You just can't sit here and say that South Carolina is do they have nicer stadiums? Do they have nicer facilities? Are there things about South Carolina that are nicer? Sure. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have a Kentucky guy on later in this week. He's going to echo the same thing. He's going to echo the same thing the Mizzou guy did. So I think Gamecock fans do have to realize that while it hurts to hear that Mizzou is South Carolina is Mizzou, listen, do I agree to the extent that they're exactly the same? No, I don't. But they're all middle-of-the-pack teams, and they all play 50-50 games against each other. That's where South Carolina is right now. Until they get to a point where they're winning 9-10 games a year, that statement is true.
Yeah, and I feel like South Carolina fans, me growing up, we beat Kentucky a lot. Up until, what was it, 09? I don't remember what the year was, but we had a streak going against them, like 14 or 15 or something, I think, in a row. Like, we beat them, like, every year, like death taxes, and we're beating Kentucky. And that changed. I mean, when Stoops came, that changed. And, you got to give your just due. You can't live in the past. In Missouri, I think that we're better set up to be a better program by far. But right now, we're not that much different. You know what I mean? And I love the Gamecocks, but I'm a realist. I say it like it is. I feel like we got more talent than them this year, and we should win that game. But they have our number right now, and until we change that, that's the case.
And I think, Will, what people need to recognize too, we're not crapping on South Carolina saying all this. You have to recognize the fact, like, Kentucky has invested a lot more in football. Missouri, they invest a lot in football. Like, the competition and the money and everything, like, everybody has stepped up their game. Everybody has. You know what I mean? So it's not a sense where South Carolina's fallen off a cliff, but these other teams, these other programs, it's you can go back to the baseball side, right? Like, it's a lot harder to win a national championship now than it was back when Carolina went back-to-back because so many more teams care about baseball. They're investing in baseball. I mean, the same goes to football. Like, Kentucky cares about football now. They didn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They didn't, right? Yeah. And is South Carolina's ceiling higher than a Kentucky or Mizzou? Sure. I don't think that's unfair to say. I really don't. Because you've had a Steve Spurrier who showed it was possible. But, I mean, dude, Kentucky's won 10 games also. You know what I mean? And, like right now, listen, winning the SEC East, it's as much a pipe dream for South Carolina as it is Kentucky, as it is for Mizzou, because Georgia ain't going anywhere. Now, that's the debate, right? That's the debate when you talk about, all right, forget Georgia. Which team in the SEC East is most well-equipped to challenge Georgia for the SEC East title? Now, that's a conversation.
I think it's Tennessee right now. It's Tennessee right now. I don't think that's even an
argument. Well, and the reason I think, and I'll say this, to be fair, I think the reason folks are going to say Tennessee, there's two reasons that I think of off the top of my head. Number one, Josh Heupel, his history as an offensive play caller. And guys, when you score the way they do, you have a chance in every game. Nobody's winning games 24-20 anymore. You're not scoring 40 a game. You don't have a chance. Until proven otherwise, they have shown they're going to be a high-flying, fun offense. It's quarterback-friendly. Their quarterback's going to put up huge numbers. They are, and also, too, so that's number one, right? The offensive identity, their brand as a program, and what Josh Heupel's doing there. There's a lot of belief in Josh Heupel and him as a coach. Right. Recruiting also. They're recruiting well. But the other reason I was going to say is that, like it or not, history matters. Tennessee gets the benefit of the doubt because they've won a national championship. you still think, when you think Tennessee football, I know recently, the last 20 years, they ain't been worth a damn. But, like, when I think of and you think of Tennessee football, you think of a big-time football program. They're one of the winningest programs in college football. I'm not saying history and tradition mean everything, because the past is the past. It's things that have happened, not will happen, but that does matter. Like, the infrastructure, it's proven. It's in place to win a national title there. They've done it before. So, like, when you ask who's most well set up to do this, I mean, if you say South Carolina, that's fine. But you're banking on South Carolina doing something they've never done before. That's winning the SEC championship. You know, they've gotten to Atlanta one whole time in 31 years. They've gotten there one whole time. Tennessee's been a big-time program before. They've been a big-time program. So, again, I'm not sitting here telling you it's impossible and that it can't happen. But if you're having that conversation, we got to be fair on all sides. Hey, Josh Heupel could turn around and go 6-6 this year and be a bum. He very well could. That could happen. Tennessee stunk.
I don't see that
They
happening,
stunk for quite a while. They stunk, I mean. So South Carolina could be that team. That's why this year is so important. Carolina goes out there and goes 9-3 minutes. They beat Tennessee again. The Gamecocks are that team. They are. And Shane Beamer should be a top 5 head coach in the SEC. He should be up for coach of the year in the SEC. Very well could happen. But, again, I know we just went on a long rant there and a long tangent, but it's just bottom line bringing it back to that South Carolina can very well be above these programs as Gamecock fans think, but it's you make yourself look foolish when you talk about a program like Mizzou and to say South Carolina is miles ahead of them and you can't beat them on the field. I mean, I just, you know, South Carolina needs to beat Kentucky again, man, because guess what? If they don't, it goes back to, well, you know, you bring back up, well, they've won 8 of 10 in the last decade. Nobody wants that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's those swing games are very pivotal, very important for that reason. You know, I talk about SEC East and SEC hierarchy. That's why those games are important.
Yeah, one more closing thought on my behalf. Tennessee, I saw a stat. I mean, Tennessee was god-awful basically from like 2011, besides a couple of years till like 2021. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't very good. They still have like the 3rd highest winning percentage in college football history.
Yeah.
Even with that bad, 10-year stretch.
Yeah.
And another thing is that my personal ranking is, I think right now, currently standing, Georgia's 1, I think Tennessee's 2, and I think it's us and Kentucky are like 1 and 1A for that 3rd spot. You know, like it was, I'm a little surprised they picked us in SEC Media Day to be 3rd. I can see why they did, and I can see why they wouldn't. But I think that us and Kentucky right now, we're neck and neck. As far as programs go. I do think we're a tick ahead of Missouri, even though they beat us. We're a tick ahead, but not far. And that's my personal opinion. I'll hang up and listen, brother.
Will, I appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much. Great stuff, Will from Dirty Murder. And I'll say this to follow up on Will's point. I picked South Carolina to finish 3rd in the SEC East. But to his point, it is by a razor-thin margin, because I've got Kentucky with a better final record than South Carolina. But I've got the Gamecocks 4-4 in SEC play, 7-5, but beating Kentucky at 8-4, 4-4 in SEC play. So South Carolina effectively getting that tiebreaker. So, it'll be interesting. I think Kentucky's got a really good football team this year. I love them bringing back Liam Cohen as their OC. I love Darren Leary at quarterback if he's healthy. They picked up 2 fantastic running backs in the portal. They've got the best group of receivers they've ever had under Mark Stoops. If they figure out the offensive line, I mean, that offense is going to be really, really good. And getting back to physicality, Stoops talked about it. Again, I know people don't want to hear about Kentucky on this show, but, we talk SEC football, man. Anyways, guys, let's jump into another break. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling as we take your questions, your comments, your calls, and more on the other side of the break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Tuesday, July the 25th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. It's always a pleasure, man. The conversation, I love it. I truly, genuinely, this fuels me. It's a blast, man. It's truly a blast. So thank you so much for the calls, guys, the questions, the comments. We still have tons to get into here on this Tuesday. Let's see. Let's get back into these. Brendan M. and Dalton going absolutely crazy in the Big Cock Club Discord. You would expect nothing less, especially when the Tennessee chatter gets underway. I can tell you this. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid that Tennessee is going to win 10 games. Guys, it's well documented. I've picked Tennessee to go 9-3. I think picking Tennessee to go 9-3 is very fair. So in my predictions, they take a step back. I think they lose to Alabama. Hell, I've got them getting upset by Mizzou. But I still think they're going to have one of the best offenses in the SEC. I still think they've got a lot of talent. The defense should be better. I don't think Joe Milton's going to be as good as Hendon Hooker, but I think he's going to be more than serviceable. And guys, if he's not, they got a 5-star waiting in the wings in Nico. So I don't have them as a 10-win team, 11. I don't think they get there, but I think it's very fair to expect Tennessee to win 9 games this year. I think it'd be a disappointing season for them if they did not hit that 9-win mark. So let's see. He says, read it, you coward. Read what? Read what? Tennessee equals Nebraska equals Colorado equals Georgia Tech. Okay. Dalton said, I'm willing to bet a lot of money Tennessee doesn't win 10 games this year. Again, I would also bet that money because I don't have them winning 10 games this year. Let's see. Kentucky's going to be better than Tennessee. Poverty programs haven't won shit since the Reagan, Bush, Clinton years. Liam Cohen's going to go back to the NFL. They'll be back to 6 wins yearly at Kentucky. Kentucky capitalized on Tennessee and USC being down in the past decade. I mean, South Carolina was down in 15. They were down in 15, 19, and 20. 20 being the COVID year. I mean, I guess so. I guess so, Brendan. Heupel teams always take steps backward in year 3 once teams figure them out. Okay, well, we'll see if their offense gets figured out. This is a big year for Heupel, no question. Big year for Tennessee, no question. Future of their program. Travis says, do you think Umeozulu makes an impact this year as a true freshman? I think so, yes. I think he's in the rotation. I don't think he's a day 1 starter. I think it's Strawn and Gear off the edges to start, but I definitely think Umeozulu will be a big-time impact player for South Carolina. No doubt. No doubt. Timmy Huckabee says you stopped saying slapdick on Twitter. Why? Timmy, one of the reasons because I just stopped engaging in banter in that manner on Twitter. Really, truly, that's why. And because the other reason, Timmy, I would say this, and I knew this long ago, but it's something that I've learned. Here's what I'll say. This goes to thought process. This goes so far outside of sports and everything. When you put negative energy and emotion into something, you normally get a negative result. And when you put positive energy and emotion into something and worry about what you can control, and it's not a guarantee you'll get a positive result, but it's damn near a guarantee when you put negative energy, negative emotion, you're going to get a negative result. And so going around calling people slapdicks on social media while it was lighthearted and funny and whatever, dude, I've got bigger fish to fry and more important things to worry about. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't need to be spending all day, and I'm not someone, listen, I love the banter. I'm open to the banter, but engaging with trolls and engaging with nonsense on Twitter especially, it just fuels that fire. It just fans those flames, and I'm not here to do that, man. I rarely engage anymore on social media, very rarely engage on Twitter, and that is on purpose. That is on purpose for sure. So it's just, unfortunately, Twitter's a place, man, where, when you've got some of the slapdickery going on, the only people who win, and this is really the answer, Timmy, the only people who really win when you swing down is the people you're swinging down at. That's, and I don't mean that as this person's below this person. What I mean by that is just simply like, people who are trying to bring you down to their level and down to their misery and talk nonsense. And so I'm not going to go around calling people slapdicks. And listen, I respect everybody's opinion, respect their vantage point. And so, yeah, I don't really make it much of a habit anymore, Timmy, to call people slapdicks on Twitter. And I'm happy with that. I mean, listen, it's some people are unfortunately not able to take a joke. And, it is what it is. So, yeah. So that's why. Let's see. Travie says, Coach Ford, excuse me, not Travie. Coach Ford says, JC's full of crap. Stars don't matter. Then lists 3 4-star kids saying that make a great class. Stars are not everything, but when you are too deep with 4 and 5-star kids, you'll likely be good. Competition. I don't think JC, Coach Ford, was insinuating that stars don't matter. Yeah, I don't think that he was insinuating they don't matter at all. You know what I mean? I don't think so. I don't think so. Coach Ford. The back and forth with John Edward said, you were a sunshine pumper. Fact is, we cannot say stars don't matter. Then say we can't win because others are covered up with stars. Stars are not everything, but they absolutely matter. I mean, Coach Ford, that's 110% correct. I mean, it just is. Stars do matter. They do. They're not everything, but they do, man. They do. Bottom line, they do. And I mean, listen, I think stars are more important than coaching. I really do. Having the Jimmy and Joes, guys, Hugh Freeze said it at SEC Media Days. Great players make a great play caller. Bottom line. And so, again, that's why I've said about Dowell Loggins with the OC thing. I think he's an upgrade over Marcus Satterfield. No doubt, no question. But if they can't figure out the offensive line, then play calls ain't going to matter all that much. If the play is getting blown up in the backfield, if you don't have balance offensively and you can't find a running game, I don't give a damn who the OC is. Steve Spurrier's offense would struggle if they couldn't block and couldn't run the ball. So I think that's what folks are going to realize by season's end. I think South Carolina has real problems on the offensive front. I think they do. And, not to continue to harp on it, but, my concern and just what really perplexes me, and I'd love to hear from you guys. What perplexes me, South Carolina has done a really, really, really good job in the transfer portal. They have. They've done a good job in the transfer portal picking up impact guys. They've done a good job picking up impact guys. But you look at the offensive line, and these guys might turn out to be really good players. But you look at guys you get from Charlotte, from Mercer, from Yale, from others, if you will. And again, they might turn out to be really good players. But then, I look at Kentucky, and they picked up portal guys from Alabama, from Southern Cal. I look at some other schools. They're picking up these Power 5 SEC transfers. I'm just wondering, O-line was a position of need, and it surprises me. It surprises me. All I'm saying. It surprises me. Brennan M. says, Clayton White seemed to figure it out, especially in the second half. I mean, Brendan, again, sure. Listen, I hope Carolina beats Tennessee by 50. I really do. I really do. I hope they do. I mean, Tennessee did still score 38 points. I don't know. Hey, you score 63 again, what does it matter? Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Peyton.
Peyton, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Not much, partner. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic, my friend. How are you?
And just a hot old day in South Carolina. Sweat my ass off at work. But game day, man, what a big announcement. That I think that turns opening day up just a little bit more for Carolina, man. What a big announcement! That's really gonna be something special if we find a way to pull this off. It's gonna be great, man. What are your thoughts about it? What's your initial reaction?
Yeah, no, listen, like you mentioned, I mean, it definitely turns things up in regards to that game, the anticipation, the hype. I mean, it's not that we needed this validation, but when you get College Game Day, it's like this is a big game. There's no question this is a big game. So I think it's awesome. Obviously, first off, from the fanfare and fans getting to go out there and support, make signs, wave flags, do that whole deal. Putting the Gamecocks program in the spotlight because, hey, it's the first Saturday of week one. I'll say this: we have week 0. Obviously, that'll technically be the first Saturday of college football, but this is the real first Saturday of everybody getting going. So all eyes will be on College Game Day. So Shane Beamer, the Gamecocks, will have the opportunity to advertise their program and sell their program and continue to do so and build up the hype and anticipation. And, it does put more pressure on the game because you want to go out there and you want to put on a show. So, yeah, I mean, it's an awesome thing from the fan perspective, obviously, and fans getting to go to the event. And, as someone that has been to College Game Day before, I would say I urge everyone to get out there because it's a really, really fun time, man. So definitely urge folks to be out there and, should be a lot of fun. Again, like you mentioned, it just puts even more hype and anticipation on the matchup.
It's gonna be so awesome, man, and hopefully they can pack out pack it out. So, but you said that the tickets are pretty expensive, and I understand that, but still, I really hope that.
I would expect a packed house. I really would expect a packed house, my friend. I think with the hype, with a pair of future NFL quarterbacks, and I would expect a hell of an environment.
Yeah, I would expect the same thing, but I think if we can come out and make a statement and have a sort of a statement home setter for the season, I think Beamer talked about last year at the end of the season, recruiting was already going well, and then you win those 2 games at the end of the season, and it just takes it to another level. I think if we come out and make a statement and pick up another sort of signature win under Beamer, I think that can take it to another level after that.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, listen, for sure. I mean, you talk about a program in South Carolina that's looking to, for the 3rd straight season under Shane Beamer, overachieve yet again. Winning that North Carolina game will be huge. Winning that North Carolina game will be huge. I think that just building positive momentum. And I'll say this. Nobody wants to hear this. Even if you lose, the season's not lost. We saw last year, South Carolina lost to Arkansas week 2, Georgia week 3, started 1-2. The season was salvaged. Carolina heated up. But, I mean, there's no getting around it. That is a massive swing game in this season.
Yeah. What's the spread currently on that game? Do you have it?
I believe it's 1.5 UNC. I'd have to check again, but I believe it's 1.5 UNC is the favorite, which is surprising to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surprising, but at least it's fair. At least it's not something outlandish like 4.5 or 5, something outlandish. But I think it's going to be a hell of a game, man. I think we're going to find out a lot about both teams and just how well the offseason went for both teams. Well, I think we're going to figure that out very, very early on. So.
Yeah, can't wait to break it down, Peyton. I was just going to say, can't wait to break it down, man. It's 2 teams that I think are actually really similar to each other. Both have big-time quarterbacks. Both have questions at the line of scrimmage. Both have new OCs. There's a lot of similarities with these two, so I think it's going to make for one hell of a game.
That's right, and both teams had pretty solid finishes to their regular seasons last year, and they had a lot of hype coming into this season, and hopefully the team in red will pull it out and establish who the real Carolina is. So,
indeed.
Yeah,
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, it's going to be great. Got to head on in back to work here, man. I appreciate it.
Love getting on the platform. Love talking to you, bud. Thanks, Spurs Up Show. Go Cox, man.
Go Cox, Peyton. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the call. Always great stuff from Peyton. Let me get to this. Jacob B says, no reason to bother with him. Dude doesn't read comments at all. Jacob, I absolutely 110% do read comments. Callers are going to be first priority, though, Jacob B. I'm sure you can understand that, right? If you call in, I'm not going to be sitting there reading comments while you're on the phone line. So I'm getting to the comments, Jacob B. We're getting to them, no doubt. And I actually read Coach Ford's comment earlier. Let's see. All right, let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Michael.
Michael, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Chris. Mike from Kimbella here, man. I love the show. First off, just want to say congrats on everything, man. Congrats on new studio, new store, all the hard work into the business, man, and getting to go to SEC Media Days. Great content and coverage. You certainly deserve it very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't get to call in much because of work, but just wanted to call and say congrats on everything, all the success the business is doing. Don't know if you talked about this. I agree with you. I think Dak is probably going to be RB1 come the first game. Don't know if it makes an interesting storyline, but how cool would it be? You know, he destroyed North Carolina in the Mayo Bowl a couple years ago. What would it be like to have him come and dominate North Carolina again in week 1? That would be an interesting storyline.
Well, Michael, first things first, man, I appreciate the kind words, and thank you for calling in. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. But, yeah, that would be – I'm sure they've got some very vivid memories of that Duke's Mayo Bowl and what he did to him last time. So, you know, you would think they'll be ready for him to slide to quarterback, right? I don't see how they could not think about that this go around. But he will be at the running back position, and, I mean, that would be really neat, man. And it'd be neat for Dakereon Joyner after all he's done and given and sacrificed to the South Carolina football program. Came in wanting to play quarterback, didn't work out, stuck it out anyways, went to wide receiver, doesn't get a lot of action, doesn't complain, stuck it out anyways. Now he's at running back. And Michael, to your point, I mean, I think he's RB1. Until I see otherwise, I don't know how it's going to play out the entire year. Is it going to be musical chairs at the running back position? Are they going to try to ride the hot hand? I have no idea, but I think going into week 1, he's the guy. And I mean, what a storybook finish to his career it would be if Dakereon Joyner could. I'm not even saying hit 1,000 yards, man. But if he could do 600 or 700 and make a real big time impact for this football team, I think that'd be incredible, man. It's so well deserved, and I think Gamecock Nation would love nothing more. But you know, certainly in week 1, you have to think that after that Mayo Bowl, you know, and even when I talked to a North Carolina insider over there from Tar Heel Illustrated, he mentioned Dakereon Joyner and the way that he diced them up. So I think definitely they're going to have their eye on DK in that ball game.
Yeah, definitely agree completely. And I also agree with your points on Lenore's also seeing most improved this year. Excited about the upside and hype and potential and building for the future. So anyway, keep up the great work. Love listening, man. Take care.
Michael, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the call. Great stuff there from Michael. Awesome. Yeah, and again, I think Dakereon Joyner, man, I think he's going to be a feature player for South Carolina. Absolutely. I think Dakereon Joyner, no doubt, will be a feature player in this offense. Guys, we're going to jump into one final break. On the other side, I want to continue to hear from you, more of your questions, comments, calls, and more. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
What's up, guys? We're back. Final 10 minutes or so here on the Daily Crow. On the Daily Show, Daily Crow. Taking your questions, comments, calls. I got distracted by the dogs over here. They are ready to go on their WALK. We'll just say that. 843-790-3377. Give us a call, text us, whatever you like. And I see Jacob E. My apologies. Jacob E. was not referring to me. I was like, dang, I'm trying to get all the comments I can, man. Come on now. Andrew the textbooks is apparently ESPN says 2.5 now for UNC. Wow. By the way, guys, in case you missed it, gambling is going to be a much, much bigger part of our content this year. I'm going to, I've given SEC gambling picks, right? Whatever, but it was literally as simple as me looking at the games, picking what I like, go. I'm not going to pick every single game again in regards to spread. I will say, though, there will be more SEC content in this football season than there has ever been before. There will be more SEC-wide content in regards to picks, analysis, commentary, even guests. I'd like to get a guest on, or, we've already got a couple, but guys that want to talk the entire SEC and talk about the week that was, all that good stuff. So going to be a lot of fun. Again, the content is going to be bleeding out of the eyeballs, as you all expect. I can't even keep up with the Coach Ford, John Edward back and forth. I can't. I can't keep up with it. Austin Gregory, is South Carolina closer to Mizzou or Kentucky? I would definitely say Kentucky, Austin, because I think Mizzou is, their head coach is Jeff Fisher, bro. Like their head coach is on the hot seat, literally. So I'd say Kentucky because I think there's a chance that Mizzou finishes 6th in the SEC East this year. I think it's South Carolina and Kentucky fighting for that 3 spot right now. Let's see. Travie, does Landon Sampson make a name for himself this year? I hope so. Travie, I hope so. He was a big-time guy in recruiting. I hope so. Apparently, per John Edward, he blocked Coach Ford. What is going on with the drama? Come on, y'all. Why can't we be friends? Why can't we? How about this article, by the way, coming over from, I don't know if you guys have seen it on Twitter. Actually, we'll get into that in a second. Let's jump back to the phone lines here.
Call from Fiat. To accept, press 1.
I got a call from Fiat. Okay. Got a call from Fiat. This article here from Land Grant Holy Land, an Ohio State Buckeyes community. Making bold predictions, media darlings that won't meet expectations. So teams they think will underachieve this year. They've actually got Clemson under 10 wins. Say their streak of double-digit wins ends at 12 seasons. They've got Tennessee under 9.5 wins. They've got them probably winning 9 games, 8 games, whatever, under 9.5. Then they list South Carolina. And this is where things get very interesting. Again, this is landgrantholyland.com. And this is their take, their opinion. What does it mean? Apparently, this is the SB Nation site of Ohio State. They have this to say about the Gamecocks. Shane Beamer has become a media darling, and I bought in as well. When is enough, though? This guy beat a bad Clemson team by their standards, beat up on a Tennessee squad over its skis who lost its starting quarterback in the fourth quarter and then ended the year on a disappointing note in their bowl game. I could just stop right there because already that first paragraph it's absurd to poke holes in those wins. Either way, we'll continue. Beamer has done a commendable job in getting South Carolina back to being a respectable program, but they are still a tier below where most people have them. There are 2 facts that remain certain about the South Carolina program. They still have Spencer Rattler playing quarterback, and they still lost to Tyler Buckner in the Gator Bowl. Either way, you guys get the rest. I'd much, much rather jump to the phone lines and talk to our guy here. Let's jump to it.
Call from
Robbie Davis, Zaxby's Hall of Famer.
Robbie Davis, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing on this Tuesday?
I am doing fantastic. I appreciate you calling in, my friend. What's up?
I just wanted to say that this whole Mac Brown playing the underdog BS is insane, okay? Because does he have any idea how dumb he sounds saying that his team is the underdog whenever his team is favored to win by 2.5 points? If my team was favored to win by 2.5 points, I would not be calling my team an underdog. I would not be doing that at all.
Robbie, I don't know. I don't know if he realizes they're favored to win the ball game. I have no idea. I have no clue.
Well, somebody needs to tell him because he sounds really stupid saying that his team is underdog. He must not know.
Somebody needs to inform Mac Brown that they are indeed the favorites. Yeah, I don't know. Either way, man, it's basically a pick 'em. He's trying to get his team fired up, gamesmanship, whatever. It is what it is. So.
Yeah, and and regardless of who our starting 11 is, even though we basically know who a majority of our starting 11 is going to be for the season opener. Okay, Rattler at quarterback, Juice at wideout. I mean, the list goes on and on. Okay, but just say for hypothetical reasons, what if with Joyner at starting at running back on September the 2nd, what if he does better than what we all expected? Would you expect him to start week 2 against Furman?
If DeCarrion Joyner does well in week 1, will he start in week 2? Yes, absolutely. I mean, why would you take him out? So I think, and again, we're going to talk next week, top storylines going into fall camp. I mean, the running back position is definitely one. I mean, listen, we're just guessing. I guess it's not a guarantee that DeCarrion Joyner is the starting running back, but I think unless Dontavius Braswell comes in and he's much unless he's ready to play as a 4-star freshman, whatever, I just don't know who else to go with. I really don't. And, it's not the greatest position to be in where you say, well, we don't have anybody else, but, DeCarrion Joyner, what he provides to you as an athlete, he's a veteran football player. So I don't know if this is going to be a situation where they're trying to find RB1 for the season or if this is they're going to try different guys and ride hot hands. But to answer your question, Robbie, yes. If DeCarrion Joyner has a productive week 1, I would expect he will start week 2.
And it's just going to be interesting to see what happens throughout the season because do I expect DeCarrion Joyner to be our starting running back for all 12 games? No. Will I be happy for DeCarrion if that were to happen? Yes. But do I expect it to happen? No. I don't care who the starting 11 are as long as we get the dub. I do not care. I don't, as I like to always say, I don't give a flying monkey fart. Okay, you could freaking put a dog back there and have him be running back. I don't care who it is. Okay, I don't care. At the end of the day, us as fans do not have control over who is in the starting 11. Okay, the coaching staff has to do that. Beamer has to do that. And he's going to do what is best for this team. If having DeCarrion Joyner be the starting running back for the season opener is the best option, then I'm gonna be like, all right, it's time to line up and see what he's made of, because he's never played running back before. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have to just trust Beamer and let him do what he's getting paid to do and put a winning product on the field.
Let him cook, Robbie. Let him cook, as you love to say. Just let him cook.
Exactly. Let him in the kitchen and get the heck out of the way. And if he asks for an ingredient, give him the ingredient and get the heck out of the way.
I love it, man. Well, I'm sure he'll do that, man. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
For sure. And my brother's also doing a little better.
It's great to hear, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Better.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, man.
So,
for sure.
Hopefully within the next month or so, he can actually eat some solid food, because I'm pretty sure using a blender to eat is a pain in the keister. But he's doing a little better.
I'm glad to hear it, Robbie.
So that's all I got. I'm going to go ahead and get off of here, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good. Robbie, you're the man. I appreciate you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Take care. Great stuff from Robbie Davis, and what a way to close out the show here on this Tuesday. Always love hearing from Robbie. Guys, we're going to go ahead and close it up again. Appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so you get notifications when we drop new video content, when we go live. Also, of course, the simulations are exclusively on YouTube. We'll go live tonight, 7 o'clock, as we take on the Georgia Bulldogs. Also, make sure you head over to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe there. Rate the show as well. It helps out the show, and stay tuned to all the content bleeding out the eyeballs. Guys, appreciate you all. Thank you all so much again for the love, the support. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure, again, stay tuned to all the content. Appreciate you all tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.